The origins of Armageddon, like many worlds of the Imperium, are shrouded in the mists of a forgotten age. Evidence suggests the planet was first colonized during the Dark Age of technology, when humanity's reach extended unfettered across the stars. Ancient data vaults recovered from the deepest foundations of Armageddon's primary hives contain fragmented records indicating the world was initially valued for its abundant natural resources and strategic position along stable warp routes. During this golden era of human expansion, the world, then known by another name lost to time, served as a burgeoning industrial center. Vast automated factories and processing plants were established to exploit the planet's rich mineral deposits and extensive promethium reserves. These early colonists, armed with technologies now considered heretical, reshaped the planet's surface to suit their needs, constructing massive atmospheric processors and the first rudimentary hive structures that would eventually evolve into the towering industrial metropolises of the modern era. The coming of Old Night changed everything. As warp storms isolated human worlds and the Men of Iron rebelled against their creators, Armageddon, like countless other colonies, was cut off from Terra. The precise events that transpired during this age of isolation remain largely unknown, though fragmentary records speak of civil strife, technological regression, and desperate attempts to maintain the increasingly complex infrastructure necessary for survival on the harsh world. When the Emperor's Great Crusade reached the outer systems of what would later be designated Segmentum Solar in the late 30th millennium, Armageddon was rediscovered by the 94th Expeditionary Fleet. Initial compliance was achieved with minimal bloodshed. The planet's ruling technocratic councils recognized the futility of resistance against the might of the Imperium's forces and the potential benefits of reintegration into humanity's expanding dominion. The Imperial surveyors who assessed Armageddon noted its exceptional strategic value. Positioned at the nexus of several stable warp routes and blessed with extensive promethium fields, the world represented a valuable addition to the nascent Imperium's industrial base. The Mechanicum representatives accompanying the expeditionary fleet were particularly interested in the partially functioning SDC technologies still maintained by the planet's tech priests, and quickly established a presence that would grow into the sprawling forge complexes that dot Armageddon's surface today. During the early Imperial period, Armageddon underwent rapid development under the guidance of Imperial administrators. The ancient hive structures were expanded and reinforced, creating the massive population centers that would become known as Hive Hellsreach, Hive Acheron, and Hive Tartarus, among others. These vast urban complexes were designed to house the millions of workers required to operate the planet's burgeoning industrial base. The planet's environment presented significant challenges to Imperial development. Armageddon's atmosphere, toxic and corrosive, necessitated the construction of extensive filtration systems and the implementation of strict environmental protocols. Outside the protected hive cities, only the most heavily equipped and sealed vehicles could operate for extended periods. This hostile environment shaped the development of Armageddon's infrastructure, and by extension, the character of its people. The planet's equatorial regions, where the bulk of its promethium reserves were located, presented particularly difficult conditions. Temperatures regularly soared to levels that could cook an unprotected human in minutes, while toxic dust storms scoured the landscape with abrasive particles capable of stripping paint from vehicles and flesh from bone. Despite these challenges, the Imperium's need for promethium, the lifeblood of its war machines, drove continuous expansion of the extraction facilities in these inhospitable zones. By the mid-31st millennium, Armageddon had established itself as a vital industrial world within the Imperium's core territories. Its manufacturing complexes produced everything from basic infantry equipment to components for Titans, while its refineries processed millions of barrels of promethium daily for shipment throughout Segmentum Solar. The planet's strategic importance grew as the Imperium expanded, its products fueling the endless wars of the Emperor's domain. The harsh realities of life on Armageddon fostered a distinctly pragmatic culture among its inhabitants. Survival in the toxic wastes or the cramped confines of the hives required discipline, efficiency, and a willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. These traits, ingrained over generations, would later form the foundation of the Steel Legion's military doctrine. Administratively, Armageddon was organized along standard Imperial lines, with a planetary governor appointed by the Adeptus Terra overseeing the various hive cities, each with its own local governance structure. The planetary aristocracy that emerged consisted primarily of industrial magnates and military leaders, their power derived from control of the planet's manufacturing and refining capabilities. Competition between the hives was fierce but regulated, driving innovation and productivity while maintaining the overall stability necessary for continued Imperial compliance. The development of Armageddon's planetary defense force reflected the world's industrial character and environmental challenges. From its earliest days, the PDF emphasized mechanized warfare, utilizing the planet's manufacturing capabilities to field large numbers of armored vehicles and artillery pieces. The toxic atmosphere necessitated the development of efficient rebreather systems and environmental protection gear, which would later become hallmarks of the Steel Legion's distinctive appearance. Training facilities were established throughout the hive cities, with particular emphasis placed on urban combat and operations in toxic environments. The PDF's officer corps was drawn primarily from the planet's aristocracy, creating a professional military elite with close ties to the industrial leadership. This integration of military and industrial power would prove crucial during later conflicts, enabling rapid mobilization and production increases in times of crisis. By the 32nd millennium, Armageddon's PDF had evolved into a formidable fighting force, regularly conducting exercises in the toxic wastes between hives and developing specialized tactics for armored warfare in hostile environments. The planet's strategic importance meant that its defense forces received priority access to equipment and training resources, further enhancing their capabilities. The transformation of the PDF into what would eventually become known as the Steel Legion began in earnest following a series of Ork raids on the system's outer planets in the mid-32nd millennium. These attacks, while successfully repelled, highlighted the need for a more specialized and mobile defense force capable of responding rapidly to threats across the planet's vast industrial zones. Under the direction of Lord General Maximilian von Straub, an ancestor of the infamous Hermann von Straub, who would later lead the planet during the Second War for Armageddon, the PDF underwent a comprehensive reorganization. Heavy emphasis was placed on mechanized infantry operations, with troops trained to fight alongside and from within the Chimera armored transports that would become synonymous with the Steel Legion's battlefield doctrine. The distinctive uniform of the Armageddon forces, long greatcoats, respirator masks, and helmets designed to protect against the toxic atmosphere, was standardized during this period. Originally purely functional, these elements would later become powerful symbols of the Steel Legion's identity and resilience. The planet's forge complexes, operating under the authority of the Adeptus Mechanicus, but closely integrated with Armageddon's industrial base, played a crucial role in equipping the reformed defense forces. Specialized patterns of Imperial Guard equipment were developed to suit the planet's unique conditions, including modified Chimera variants with enhanced filtration systems and sealed crew compartments. As Armageddon's military capabilities grew, so too did its importance within the broader Imperial defense network. By the late 32nd millennium, regiments raised from Armageddon were regularly tithed to the Imperial Guard, serving with distinction in campaigns throughout Segmentum Solar. These early deployments helped refine the tactics and equipment that would later define the Steel Legion, as Armageddon troops adapted their mechanized warfare doctrine to a variety of battlefield environments. The planet's industrial output continued to expand throughout this period, with new hive cities established to house the growing population needed to maintain production levels. The largest of these, Hive Acheron, became a center for munitions production, while Hive Hellsreach specialized in vehicle components and armor plating. This industrial specialization created a complex web of interdependence between the hives, necessitating extensive transportation networks despite the hostile surface conditions. Massive armored convoys became a common sight on Armageddon's toxic plains, transporting raw materials, components, and finished products between hives and to the spaceports that connected the planet to the broader Imperium. Protecting these vital supply lines became a primary responsibility of the planetary defense forces, further emphasizing the importance of mobile, mechanized units capable of operating independently in the hostile environment. The social structure that developed on Armageddon during this period reflected the planet's industrial character. The upper echelons of hive society consisted of industrial magnates, military leaders, and administratum officials, while the vast majority of the population comprised factory workers, technicians, and soldiers. Life was harsh but purposeful, with every citizen aware of their role in maintaining the planet's crucial production output. Education systems focused on technical skills and military training, with promising youths identified early for specialized instruction. The most gifted might be selected for induction into the Adeptus Mechanicus or officer training programs, while the majority received enough education to function effectively in the factories or as enlisted personnel in the defense forces. By the dawn of the 40th millennium, Armageddon had established itself as one of the Imperium's most important industrial worlds, its products fueling war efforts across multiple sectors. The planet's defense forces, now officially designated as the Steel Legion following their formal incorporation into the Imperial Guard structure, had developed a reputation for efficiency, discipline, and tactical flexibility. The harsh environment that had challenged the planet's earliest colonists had shaped a military and industrial culture uniquely suited to the grim realities of the 41st millennium. The pragmatism, resilience, and technical aptitude fostered by generations of survival on Armageddon would soon be tested as never before, as the planet faced threats that would shake the Imperium to its core and forever enshrine the Steel Legion in Imperial military history. The foundations laid during these formative centuries, the industrial infrastructure, the military traditions, and the uncompromising character of Armageddon's people would prove crucial in the face of the cataclysmic conflicts that loomed on the horizon. The Forge of Armageddon had produced not just weapons and vehicles, but warriors tempered by adversity and prepared to stand against the galaxy's most terrible foes. The Steel Legion's regimental structure reflects both the industrial efficiency of Armageddon and the practical necessities of warfare on a toxic death world. Unlike the more ceremonial hierarchies of regiments from more civilized worlds, the Steel Legion's command structure emphasizes rapid decision-making and tactical flexibility, qualities essential for mechanized warfare in hostile environments. At the apex of the Steel Legion's command structure sits the Lord General, typically drawn from one of Armageddon's prominent industrial families. The current Lord General, Kurov, maintains his headquarters in the fortified command bunker beneath Hive Hellsreach, where a network of Vox casters and tactical display units allows for real-time monitoring of military operations across the planet. The Lord General's staff includes senior officers responsible for logistics, intelligence, and strategic planning, many of whom have served in multiple campaigns against the Orks. Below the Lord General, the Steel Legion divides its forces into battle groups, each commanded by a general or lieutenant general. These battle groups operate with considerable autonomy, allowing them to respond quickly to emerging threats without waiting for orders from high command. Each battle group typically consists of multiple regiments, with combined arms capabilities including infantry, armor, and artillery elements. This organizational flexibility proved crucial during the Third War for Armageddon, when communication networks were frequently disrupted by Ork jamming devices and atmospheric interference. The regiment forms the primary tactical unit of the Steel Legion, commanded by a colonel who typically has at least 15 years of combat experience. Steel Legion regiments are numbered rather than named, with designations like the 8th Armageddon Steel Legion or the 16th Armageddon Mechanized Infantry. Each regiment consists of approximately 3,000 to 5,000 troops, though these numbers can fluctuate significantly during extended campaigns. The regimental structure follows the standard Imperial Guard pattern, with some modifications to accommodate the Steel Legion's mechanized doctrine. A typical regiment includes a headquarters company, 3 to 5 infantry companies, a heavy weapons company, and attached support elements such as sentinel squadrons or hellhound platoons. Unlike foot infantry regiments from other worlds, Steel Legion infantry companies are fully mechanized, with each platoon assigned a complement of Chimera armored personnel carriers. Companies, commanded by captains, form the backbone of Steel Legion tactical operations. Each company consists of 3 to 5 platoons plus a command section, and company support weapons. Company commanders in the Steel Legion are expected to demonstrate both tactical acumen and technical knowledge, as the integration of infantry and vehicle operations requires careful coordination. Many company commanders begin their careers as vehicle commanders, giving them intimate familiarity with the capabilities and limitations of the regiment's chimeras and other armored vehicles. At the platoon level, the Steel Legion's organization reflects its emphasis on combined arms operations. A standard platoon consists of 3 infantry squads, each with 10 men, plus a command squad led by a lieutenant. Each infantry squad is assigned a dedicated chimera, with the vehicle crew considered part of the squad for operational purposes. This integration of vehicle and infantry elements at the squad level represents a key aspect of Steel Legion doctrine, allowing for seamless coordination between mounted and dismounted operations. Squad leaders, holding the rank of sergeant, form the lowest tier of the Steel Legion's command structure. These non-commissioned officers are typically veterans of multiple campaigns, their experience evident in the campaign ribbons and kill markings that adorn their uniforms and vehicles. Squad sergeants command not only their infantry squads, but also direct the operations of their assigned chimeras, working closely with vehicle commanders to maximize tactical effectiveness. The Steel Legion's mechanized doctrine permeates every aspect of its organizational structure. Unlike regiments that treat vehicles as separate support elements, the Steel Legion integrates its chimeras and other armored vehicles directly into its combat formations. Each chimera is assigned to a specific infantry squad, with crew and infantry training together to develop the coordination necessary for effective mechanized operations. The standard Steel Legion chimera differs slightly from those used by other regiments, featuring enhanced filtration systems to cope with Armageddon's toxic atmosphere and additional armor plating on vulnerable points. Vehicle crews receive specialized training in operations under chemical and biological warfare conditions, allowing them to maintain effectiveness even when external environmental seals are compromised. Beyond the ubiquitous chimeras, the Steel Legion employs a wide range of Imperial Guard vehicles adapted for Armageddon's harsh conditions. Leman Russ battle tanks form the backbone of the Legion's armored capabilities, with the Mars Pattern Vanquisher variant particularly favored for its long-range anti-armor capabilities. Hellhound flame tanks, with their ability to clear large areas of enemy infantry, are employed extensively in urban combat operations, while Basilisk artillery provides crucial fire support for advancing mechanized formations. The Steel Legion also maintains specialized formations for particular battlefield roles. The most elite of these are the Stormtrooper companies, equipped with carapace armor and hellguns rather than the standard issue flak armor and las guns of regular infantry. These Stormtroopers, often referred to as grenadiers within the Steel Legion, specialize in high-risk operations such as deep strikes behind enemy lines or assaults on heavily fortified positions. Veteran squads represent another specialized element within the Steel Legion's structure. Composed of soldiers who have survived multiple campaigns, these squads are typically assigned the most dangerous missions and equipped with the best weapons available. Veteran squad members can be identified by the additional armor plates attached to their standard gear and the kill markings painted on their helmets and shoulder guards. Special weapons teams constitute a flexible tactical resource within Steel Legion formations. These small units, typically consisting of 3 to 5 soldiers equipped with plasma guns, meltaguns, or flamers, are attached to infantry platoons as needed to provide additional firepower against specific threats. During the Second War for Armageddon, special weapons teams equipped with plasma guns proved particularly effective against Ork knobs and their heavily armored bodyguards. The recruitment process for the Steel Legion begins in the towering hive cities of Armageddon. Each hive is assigned a recruitment quota based on its population, with Hive Hellsreach and Hive Acheron providing the largest number of recruits due to their size and industrial importance. Initial screening takes place at recruitment stations established in the mid-levels of each hive, where Munitorium officials assess potential recruits for physical fitness and basic aptitude. Those who pass the initial screening undergo a series of more rigorous tests designed to evaluate their potential for service in the Steel Legion. These tests include simulated combat scenarios, technical aptitude evaluations, and psychological assessments. Candidates who demonstrate particular skill with vehicles or mechanical systems are often fast-tracked for training as Chimera crew members or technical specialists. The transformation from Hive Dweller to Steel Legion Soldier begins at one of several training facilities established in the outer zones of Armageddon's major hives. These facilities, known colloquially as forges among the Steel Legion, subject recruits to a brutal 16-week basic training regimen designed to instill discipline, combat skills, and unit cohesion. The harsh conditions of these training centers, with their toxic atmosphere training zones and simulated combat environments, prepare recruits for the realities of warfare on Armageddon and beyond. Basic training emphasizes the fundamentals of mechanized infantry operations, with recruits learning to fight both as dismounted infantry and as part of Chimera crews. All recruits, regardless of their eventual specialization, receive instruction in vehicle maintenance, communications procedures, and chemical warfare survival techniques. This broad training base ensures that every Steel Legion soldier can function effectively in multiple roles if casualties require reorganization of units in the field. Following basic training, recruits are assigned to specialist training programs based on their demonstrated aptitudes and the needs of the regiment. Infantry specialists receive additional training in urban combat tactics and operations in toxic environments, while vehicle crew candidates undergo intensive instruction in Chimera operations, maintenance, and tactical coordination with infantry elements. Officer candidates, selected from the most promising recruits or drawn from Armageddon's industrial families, attend a separate officer training facility located near Hive Tartarus. This 6-month program combines theoretical instruction in tactics and strategy with practical leadership exercises conducted in the toxic wastes surrounding the hive. Officer cadets who successfully complete this program receive their commissions in a ceremony traditionally held in the shadow of Hive Tartarus's massive promethium refineries, symbolizing the industrial might they are sworn to defend. The transition from training to active service occurs when recruits are assigned to their permanent units. New soldiers typically join existing squads that have suffered casualties, allowing them to benefit from the experience of veterans. This integration of new recruits with seasoned soldiers ensures the continuity of the Steel Legion's tactical traditions and accelerates the development of combat effectiveness among fresh troops. Throughout their service, Steel Legion soldiers continue to receive training and skill development. Regular exercises conducted in the wastes between hives allow for the testing of new tactics and equipment, while simulated combat scenarios held within specially designed training facilities keep skills sharp during periods between deployments. Veteran soldiers often serve as instructors for these ongoing training programs, passing their battlefield experience to the next generation of Steel Legion troops. The Steel Legion's emphasis on mechanized warfare shapes every aspect of its training and organizational structure. Unlike foot infantry regiments, which may treat vehicles as mere transport to be abandoned once combat is joined, Steel Legion doctrine treats the Chimera as an integral weapon system that remains engaged throughout the battle. Infantry squads train extensively in rapid mounting and dismounting procedures, allowing them to transition quickly between mounted and dismounted operations as tactical situations evolve. This integration extends to the regiment's logistical systems as well. The Steel Legion's supply chain is designed to support highly mobile mechanized operations, with fuel and ammunition stockpiles positioned strategically across operational areas. Mobile repair units accompany Steel Legion formations into battle, allowing for rapid field repairs to damaged vehicles and minimizing combat losses due to mechanical failures. The distinctive silhouette of an Armageddon Steel Legion trooper stands as one of the most recognizable sights on Imperial battlefields, a figure clad in a heavy greatcoat, face obscured by a rebreather mask, advancing alongside rumbling Chimera transports through clouds of toxic gas or artillery smoke. This iconic appearance stems not from ceremonial tradition but harsh practical necessity, as the Steel Legion standard issue equipment reflects the brutal environmental conditions of their homeworld. At the core of every Steel Legion trooper's kit is the M36 Cantrell pattern lasgun, a reliable and robust weapon well suited to the toxic environments of Armageddon. These lasguns feature additional sealing around power packs and firing mechanisms to prevent corrosion from acidic atmospheres. Steel Legion variants typically include reinforced stocks and barrels designed to withstand the corrosive dust storms common to Armageddon's wastelands. Each weapon undergoes regular maintenance rituals, with troopers trained to field strip and reassemble their lasguns even while wearing full environmental protection gear. The most distinctive element of Steel Legion equipment is the rebreather apparatus worn by all personnel. Unlike the simple filter masks used by many Imperial Guard regiments, the Armageddon pattern rebreather is a sophisticated piece of equipment featuring multi-stage filtration systems and internal oxygen reserves. The main filter canister contains specialized absorption materials capable of neutralizing Armageddon's most common atmospheric toxins, while backup filters provide redundancy in case of damage or extended deployment periods. The mask seals tightly against the face with a rubberized gasket, connecting to the filter canister via a corrugated breathing tube. Complementing the rebreather is the Steel Legion's distinctive greatcoat, manufactured from heavy synthetic fabric treated with chemical-resistant compounds. These coats serve multiple purposes: protection from toxic precipitation, insulation against temperature extremes common to Armageddon's wastelands, and limited protection against shrapnel and debris. The coats extend below the knee and feature high collars that seal against the rebreather mask, creating a more complete environmental barrier. Beneath the greatcoat, troopers wear standard pattern flak armor modified with additional sealing at joints and attachment points. Steel Legion helmets deserve special mention for their specialized design. Constructed from impact-resistant materials, these helmets feature integrated attachment points for rebreather components and communications equipment. The distinctive flared shape at the rear provides additional protection against debris kicked up by nearby vehicle movements, a practical consideration for troops frequently operating alongside Chimera transports. Helmet markings indicate squad designation and rank, with veteran troopers often adding unofficial kill markings or campaign symbols. Standard gear for all Steel Legion personnel includes chemical detection equipment ranging from simple reactive patches on greatcoats that change color when exposed to specific toxins to more sophisticated handheld auspex units carried by squad leaders and specialists. These devices allow troops to monitor environmental conditions and detect changes that might indicate chemical attacks or dangerous atmospheric phenomena. Squad leaders and officers carry additional communications equipment, typically compact Vox units designed to interface with vehicle systems. Armageddon's toxic environment necessitates specialized medical equipment as well. Steel Legion medics carry detoxification kits alongside standard field medical supplies, allowing them to treat exposure to chemical agents or environmental toxins. These kits include specialized injectors capable of delivering counter agents through sealed uniforms without compromising environmental protection. Every trooper carries basic detox pills and exposure treatment patches as part of their standard equipment. The Steel Legion's mechanized nature extends to their personal equipment loadouts. Unlike foot infantry, who must carry all supplies personally, Steel Legion troopers distribute heavier equipment among their assigned vehicles. This allows for increased ammunition loads, additional environmental protection supplies, and more comprehensive field survival gear. Standard practice dictates that each trooper maintains a grab bag of essential equipment in their assigned Chimera, allowing for rapid response to changing battlefield conditions. Weapon specialists within Steel Legion squads carry an array of special weapons adapted for Armageddon's harsh conditions. Flamers, particularly valued for their effectiveness against Ork infantry, feature reinforced fuel tanks and protected ignition systems. Plasma guns, while less common due to their maintenance requirements in corrosive environments, include additional heat dissipation systems to prevent overheating in Armageddon's already sweltering conditions. Melt-a-guns, with their devastating anti-armor capabilities, round out the special weapons complement of most squads. At the heart of the Steel Legion's vehicle pool stands the Chimera armored transport, the ubiquitous personnel carrier that defines their mechanized doctrine. Armageddon pattern Chimeras feature several modifications from standard Imperial Guard variants. Enhanced filtration systems protect crew and passengers from toxic environments, while reinforced track assemblies better withstand the corrosive soils of Armageddon's wastelands. Additional external stowage racks accommodate the increased equipment needs of troops operating in hostile environments, and many vehicles mount supplementary fuel tanks to extend operational range during extended deployments. The standard armament of an Armageddon Chimera includes a turret-mounted multi-laser for anti-infantry operations and a hull-mounted heavy bolter for close defense. Some variants replace the multi-laser with heavy flamers for urban combat operations or heavy bolters for increased anti-infantry firepower. The lasgun array mounted in the Chimera's troop compartment allows transported infantry to contribute firepower even while mounted, though Steel Legion doctrine emphasizes the vehicle's role as a weapons platform rather than merely a transport. Leman Russ battle tanks form the armored spearhead of Steel Legion formations. The Armageddon 8th Heavy Tank Company gained particular renown during the Third War for Armageddon, fielding over 40 Leman Russ variants that accounted for the destruction of 17 Ork Stompas and countless smaller war machines. Steel Legion armored doctrine favors the Vanquisher and Exterminator variants for their anti-armor capabilities, though the standard battle tank remains the most numerous type in service. Tank crews receive extensive training in coordinated operations with mechanized infantry, allowing for seamless tactical integration. The Steel Legion maintains significant numbers of artillery pieces, with the Basilisk self-propelled gun forming the backbone of their fire support capabilities. These mobile artillery platforms provide crucial long-range fire support for advancing mechanized formations. The Steel Legion typically deploys Basilisks in batteries of 3 to 6 vehicles, with dedicated forward observer teams equipped with enhanced Auspex units to direct fire onto priority targets. Fire coordination is handled through encrypted Vox networks, allowing multiple batteries to concentrate fire on critical objectives. Specialty vehicles round out the Steel Legion's mechanized capabilities. Hellhound flame tanks excel in urban combat operations and clearing Ork-infested ruins. Their Prometheum projectors can flush out entrenched enemies from buildings or bunkers, while their sealed crew compartments provide protection against both enemy fire and environmental hazards. Sentinel Scout Walkers, modified with enhanced environmental seals and reinforced hydraulics, serve as reconnaissance elements, exploiting their mobility to scout ahead of main formations or secure flanks against enemy infiltration. The Steel Legion's vehicle pool includes numerous support vehicles critical to sustaining operations in Armageddon's hostile environment. Trojan recovery vehicles feature powerful winches and repair equipment for retrieving damaged or immobilized vehicles from the battlefield. Atlas recovery vehicles handle heavier extraction tasks, particularly for damaged Leman Russ tanks or other armored vehicles. Specialized fuel tankers with reinforced containment systems ensure supply lines remain intact during extended operations, while mobile field workshops allow for repairs and maintenance in forward areas. The Steel Legion's distinctive visual appearance extends to their vehicles as well. Most Steel Legion vehicles are painted in a base coat of khaki or desert yellow, with disruptive patterns of brown or green applied to break up their silhouettes. Vehicles operating in Armageddon's ash wastes often receive additional gray oversprays to better blend with the ashen landscape. Regimental markings appear on turrets and hull sides, with individual vehicle designations stenciled near crew hatches. Veteran vehicles often display kill markings or campaign badges, with some long-serving tanks accumulating dozens of such honors across their service lives. The battle doctrine of the Steel Legion reflects both the industrial efficiency of Armageddon and the practical necessities of warfare in toxic environments. Unlike the grinding attrition warfare favored by regiments like the Death Corps of Krieg or the massed infantry assaults of Cadian shock troops, the Steel Legion emphasizes rapid mechanized maneuver, concentrated firepower, and tactical flexibility. At its core, Steel Legion doctrine revolves around the concept of combined arms operations, with infantry and armor working in close coordination to maximize combat effectiveness. Mechanized infantry provides security for tanks against close assault threats, while armor delivers the heavy firepower needed to eliminate enemy strong points. This synergistic relationship forms the foundation of Steel Legion tactical thinking, with officers trained to consider infantry and vehicles as complementary elements rather than separate forces. The basic tactical unit in Steel Legion operations is the mechanized platoon, consisting of 3 infantry squads in their assigned chimeras plus attached support elements. These platoons operate with considerable autonomy, allowing for rapid response to changing battlefield conditions. Standard doctrine calls for platoons to advance with infantry mounted until contact with enemy forces is imminent, at which point a portion of the infantry dismounts to secure objectives, while chimeras provide fire support from protected positions. Urban combat represents a particular specialty of the Steel Legion, honed through centuries of fighting in and around Armageddon's massive hive cities. In urban environments, Steel Legion tactics emphasize the use of mounted infantry to secure key intersections and transportation arteries, establishing strongpoints from which dismounted troops can clear adjacent buildings. Chimeras serve as mobile firebase, using their multi-lasers and heavy bolters to suppress enemy positions, while infantry conducts room-to-room clearing operations. The Steel Legion's approach to vehicle warfare reflects their industrial background and technical expertise. Tank formations operate in close coordination with mechanized infantry, with standard doctrine calling for Leman Russ squadrons to advance under the protection of infantry-carrying chimeras. This integrated approach allows tanks to focus on engaging enemy armor and heavy weapons, while infantry secures their flanks against anti-tank teams or assault troops. Fire and maneuver form the basis of Steel Legion's small unit tactics. Infantry squads typically operate in pairs, with one squad providing suppressive fire while the other advances to new positions. This alternating advance continues until objectives are secured or enemy resistance necessitates a change in tactics. Vehicle crews receive similar training, with tank squadrons practicing coordinated movement techniques that maximize firepower while minimizing exposure to enemy anti-tank weapons. The Steel Legion's distinctive camouflage patterns serve both practical and psychological purposes. The predominant khaki and brown color scheme provides effective concealment in Armageddon's ash wastes and industrial zones, while the standardized appearance reinforces unit cohesion and battlefield recognition. Vehicle camouflage follows similar patterns, though with larger blocks of color to account for the greater size of tanks and transports. Unit markings within the Steel Legion follow a standardized system that allows for rapid identification of forces in the field. Company designations appear as colored bands on vehicle hulls and shoulder patches, with numerical identifiers indicating specific platoons and squads. Command vehicles feature additional markings designating their status, typically in the form of distinctive geometric patterns or doubled unit insignia. The regimental insignia of the Steel Legion, a stylized iron gauntlet grasping a lightning bolt, appears prominently on vehicles and uniforms. This symbol represents both the industrial might of Armageddon and the swift, striking power of its mechanized forces. The lightning bolt specifically references the Steel Legion's doctrine of rapid, overwhelming assaults designed to shatter enemy formations before they can effectively respond. Individual regiments within the Steel Legion maintain their own additional insignia and battle honors. typically displayed on unit standards or vehicle command turrets. These honors record significant victories and campaigns, with particularly distinguished units receiving the right to display Imperial Aquilas or other symbols of recognition granted by Sector Command or even the High Lords of Terra themselves. The dawn of the 444th year of the 41st millennium brought a shadow unlike any other to the industrial world of Armageddon. What began as disturbing reports of increased warp storm activity in neighboring sectors quickly escalated into the greatest threat the planet had faced since its incorporation into the Imperium. The Steel Legion, hardened by centuries of industrial toil and toxic wastelands, would soon face an enemy that transcended material concerns, the demonic legions of chaos led by none other than Angron, the fallen Primarch of the World Eaters. The initial warning signs appeared 3 months before the invasion proper. Astropathic communications became increasingly distorted, with messages from nearby systems containing fragmented references to blood, skulls, and whispers of a red angel returning to the material realm. Armageddon's astropathic choir reported increased difficulty in maintaining clear communications with Imperial authorities, while several outlying monitoring stations went silent without explanation. Lord Commander Dante von Heffman, the planetary governor at that time, initially attributed these disturbances to typical warp fluctuations and possible Ork raiding activity. This fateful misinterpretation would cost Armageddon dearly. By the time the Steel Legion mobilized its full strength, the threat had materialized in a form far more terrible than any greenskin horde. The invasion began with the sudden appearance of a massive space hulk designated Devourer of Souls in high orbit over Armageddon. Before the planet's orbital defense platforms could properly target this unexpected arrival, the space hulk disgorged dozens of corrupted transport craft and landing vessels. Augur arrays across the northern hemisphere of the planet registered thousands of impact sites as chaos forces made planetfall, concentrating their landings around the Hemlock River region and the manufacturing districts of Hive Volcanis. The first Imperial forces to engage the invaders were elements of the 14th Armageddon Steel Legion stationed at Firebase Hemlock. Captain Jurgen Strauss, commanding 3 mechanized platoons on routine patrol, encountered advance elements of the Chaos Force, World Eaters Traitor Marines supported by cultist auxiliaries. The patrol's Vox transmissions, preserved in Imperial archives, described giants in crimson armor, bearing chain axes and screaming battle cries to a blood god. The patrol was overwhelmed within 20 minutes, with only 2 Chimeras escaping to bring warning to the main garrison. The Steel Legion's response was immediate and characteristically methodical. Colonel Matthias Drojan of the 14th Regiment ordered a defensive perimeter established around the primary manufacturing complexes of Hive Volcanis, with Chimera mounted infantry securing key intersections, while Leman Russ battle tanks took up overwatch positions at strategic elevations. The regiment's 3 Basilisk artillery batteries deployed to pre-surveyed firing positions, their coordinates meticulously calculated to provide overlapping fields of fire across all projected enemy approach vectors. What followed was a masterclass in defensive mechanized warfare that would later be studied at the Schola Progenium. As waves of frenzied cultists charged the Steel Legion lines, disciplined lasgun volleys cut them down by the hundreds. Chimera-mounted heavy bolters swept across the advancing hordes, while precisely targeted basilisk barrages shattered larger formations before they could build momentum. For 16 hours, the 14th Regiment held its positions against increasingly desperate assaults. The tide turned with the arrival of the World Eaters' heavy armor. Corrupted Predator tanks and Chaos Defilers advanced under cover of artillery fire from plagued towers, targeting the Steel Legion's basilisk positions. Colonel Drojan ordered a fighting withdrawal to secondary defensive lines, using the manufacturing district's complex layout to channel enemy forces into prepared killing zones. This tactical flexibility, a hallmark of Steel Legion doctrine, prevented the complete collapse of the defense, but could not stem the overwhelming chaos assault indefinitely. By the 3rd day of the invasion, the situation had deteriorated dramatically. Half of Hive Volcanus had fallen to Chaos forces, with the Steel Legion conducting desperate room-to-room fighting to slow the enemy advance. The 8th and 22nd regiments deployed from neighboring hives to reinforce the defense, bringing with them additional armor and artillery support. Lord General Kurov established his command post in the primary Manufactorum complex, coordinating the increasingly desperate defense from a bunker 20 levels below the surface. It was during this critical phase that the 1st Space Marine forces arrived on Armageddon. The Space Wolves chapter, responding to astropathic distress calls, deployed 3 great companies under the command of Wolf Lord Jormag Fellhand. Their Thunderhawk gunships punched through Chaos air defenses to deliver tactical strikes against enemy command nodes, while drop pods brought assault squads directly into contested zones within Hive Volcanus. The coordination between the Steel Legion and Space Wolves demonstrated the adaptability of Imperial forces. Steel Legion Chimeras transported Space Wolf tactical squads to critical engagement zones, while the Astartes' superior close combat capabilities complemented the Guard's disciplined firepower. Colonel Drojan and Wolf Lord Fellhand established a joint command structure that maximized the strengths of both forces, with Steel Legion artillery providing fire support for Space Wolf assault groups targeting Chaos strong points. The defense of Hive Volcanus reached its climax on the 7th day of fighting when Angron himself led an assault against the primary Manufactorum complex. The fallen Primarch, now a towering demon prince of Khorne, tore through Imperial defenses with contemptuous ease. Squads of Steel Legion veterans, entrenched behind barricades of machinery and scrap, fired volley after volley into the advancing demon, their lasgun beams seeming to slide off his corrupted form without effect. Wolf Lord Fellhand and his honor guard intercepted Angron at the doors of the main assembly hall, buying time for the evacuation of critical personnel and equipment. The battle between the Space Wolves and the Demon Primarch lasted less than 10 minutes, but in that brief span, every member of Fellhand's guard was slaughtered, and the Wolf Lord himself was torn literally limb from limb. His sacrifice, however, allowed Lord General Kurov and his command staff to escape via underground transit systems to Hive Acheron, preserving the command structure necessary for continued resistance. The fall of Hive Volcanus marked a turning point in the war. With a major manufacturing center under their control, the forces of Chaos began a methodical advance across Armageddon's northern continent. Steel Legion forces conducted a fighting withdrawal, trading space for time while awaiting reinforcements. The 17th and 23rd regiments executed a series of delaying actions along the Hemlock River, using pre-positioned minefields and mobile artillery to slow the enemy advance. The tactical flexibility of the Steel Legion proved crucial during this phase. Chimera-mounted infantry conducted hit-and-run attacks against Chaos supply lines, while Sentinel squadrons performed long-range reconnaissance to track enemy movements. Colonel Thaddeus Varn of the 17th Regiment pioneered the use of Thunder Run tactics, where heavily armored Leman Russ squadrons would punch through enemy lines to disrupt rear echelon operations before withdrawing under cover of artillery fire and smoke screens. Imperial reinforcements continued to arrive piecemeal. Elements of the Blood Angels, Ultramarines, and Salamanders chapters deployed to critical sectors, while additional Guard regiments from neighboring systems bolstered the defensive lines around major population centers. The Steel Legion integrated these reinforcements into their defensive strategy, providing local knowledge and logistical support that maximized the effectiveness of the newly arrived forces. As the conflict intensified, the true nature of the threat became apparent. Inquisitor Horst of the Ordo Malleus arrived with a detachment of Grey Knights, confirming that the invasion was not merely a chaos incursion, but a full-scale demonic manifestation centered around Angron's presence. The Inquisitor's arrival brought both valuable reinforcements and a new tension to the Imperial command structure, as his authority superseded even that of the Space Marine chapter masters. The Grey Knights deployed primarily against demonic manifestations, their specialized weapons and psychic abilities proving effective where conventional tactics failed. Steel Legion forces provided security cordons around Grey Knight operations, preventing cultist interference, while the specialized Astartes dealt with warp entities. This cooperation, though necessary, created friction, as the secretive nature of the Grey Knights required strict information control, with Steel Legion officers often operating with incomplete tactical information. The war reached its decisive phase 3 months after the initial invasion. Chaos forces had secured roughly 40% of Armageddon's surface, focusing their control on the northern continent while conducting raids against Imperial positions in the south. Intelligence gathered by Steel Legion reconnaissance units and Space Marine scouts indicated that Angron was preparing for a major ritual at the plains of Anthrand, a vast open region between Hive Acheron and the Hemlock River. Imperial Command, now led by Supreme Commander Logan Grimnar of the Space Wolves, following the death of Lord General Kurov in a Chaos assassination strike, developed a counter-offensive plan designated Operation Thunderhammer. The plan called for a 3-pronged assault against the Chaos forces gathering at Anthrand, with Steel Legion armored spearheads attacking from the east and west, while Space Marine drop forces struck directly at Angron's ritual site from the north. The 8th and 14th Steel Legion regiments, reinforced with elements of the 22nd and 17th, formed the Eastern Attack Group. Colonel Drojan, now promoted to acting general following Kurov's death, commanded this force from the lead Chimera of the 14th Regiment's 1st Company. The Western Attack Group, comprising the 23rd and 29th Regiments plus Leman Russ squadrons detached from the 3rd Armored, advanced under the command of Colonel Varn. The Battle of the Plains of Anthrand began with a massive artillery barrage from over 60 Basilisk artillery pieces positioned along the southern edge of the plains. For 30 minutes, shells rained down on Chaos positions, disrupting their formations and destroying exposed armor. As the barrage lifted, Steel Legion armored columns advanced from east and west, Chimeras and Leman Russ tanks moving in tight formation across the ash-covered plain. The Chaos response was immediate and terrible. Defilers and corrupted tanks moved to engage the advancing Imperial armor, while swarms of cultists and World Eaters counter-attacked along the flanks. In the center of the plain, Angron continued his ritual, protected by a ring of bloodthirsters and other greater demons whose presence distorted reality itself around them. The Eastern Attack Group suffered heavy casualties but maintained its advance, with Chimera-mounted infantry dismounting to secure key terrain features while tanks provided fire support. Colonel Drojan coordinated the complex maneuver from his command Chimera, using encrypted Vox channels to direct artillery fire onto concentrations of enemy forces. The Western group encountered stiffer resistance, with Colonel Varn killed in the first hour of fighting when his command vehicle was destroyed by a Defiler's battle cannon. The Space Marine drop assault, delayed by warp storms and enemy anti-aircraft fire, finally commenced 4 hours into the battle. Drop pods and Thunderhawk gunships delivered Grey Knights and Space Wolves directly into the center of the Chaos ritual site, targeting Angron himself. The Grey Knights, led by Brother Captain Aurelian, deployed in a tight phalanx formation and advanced directly toward the Demon Primarch, their force weapons and storm bolters cutting through lesser demons with methodical precision. The Steel Legion's role in this final phase was critical. As the Grey Knights engaged Angron's Steel Legion forces fought to contain the Chaos counterattack that threatened to overwhelm the Space Marines' position. The 14th Regiment's 2nd Company, commanded by Captain Heinz Kurtz, executed a daring breakthrough to establish a supply corridor to the embattled Astartes, delivering crucial ammunition and extracting wounded. The climactic confrontation between Angron and the Grey Knights has been largely redacted from official Imperial records, but surviving accounts describe a psychic confrontation of unimaginable intensity. What is known with certainty is that 109 Grey Knights, including Brother Captain Aurelian and his entire command squad, gave their lives to banish Angron back to the warp. The psychic backlash from this banishment rippled across the battlefield, causing cultists to collapse in screaming heaps and lesser demons to dissolve into pools of ichor. With their leader banished and their ritual disrupted, the Chaos forces began to disintegrate. World Eaters' berserkers fought on with undiminished fury, but without central coordination, their attacks became disjointed and ineffective against the disciplined Imperial response. Steel Legion mechanized infantry exploited gaps in enemy lines, establishing blocking positions that fragmented the Chaos forces into isolated pockets that could be eliminated one by one. The aftermath of the First War for Armageddon brought a new and unexpected challenge for the Steel Legion. With the immediate threat contained, elements of the Inquisition's Ordo Malleus implemented containment protocols designed to prevent knowledge of the demonic incursion from spreading. These measures included extensive population screening, limited purges of civilians exposed to demonic entities, and memory modification procedures for Imperial Guard personnel who had witnessed the most disturbing manifestations. The Steel Legion's command structure found itself in an uncomfortable position, caught between their duty to the Imperium and their responsibility to the people of Armageddon. General Drojan and his senior officers were required to cooperate with inquisitorial authorities while simultaneously maintaining the morale and combat effectiveness of their regiments. This delicate balancing act created tensions that would influence Steel Legion attitudes toward Imperial authorities for generations to come. The most controversial aspect of the inquisitorial response was the treatment of civilian populations from regions exposed to Chaos influence. Entire hab blocks were quarantined and their residents subjected to intensive screening procedures. Those showing signs of corruption or possession were eliminated, while others underwent chemical treatments to suppress memories of demonic encounters. These measures, while arguably necessary from a containment perspective, created a legacy of distrust between Armageddon's civilian population and Imperial authorities. The relative peace following the First War for Armageddon lasted barely 50 years before disaster struck again. The first signs of the impending catastrophe appeared in the year 940 of the 41st millennium, when Ork raids on outlying settlements increased dramatically. Imperial tacticians initially dismissed these as typical greenskin probing actions, but Steel Legion reconnaissance patrols reported something more concerning. The raiders bore the distinctive red and black checkerboard patterns of a single unified tribe. In early 941, astropathic communications intercepted fragmented messages from systems bordering Armageddon sector. These reports described massive Ork fleet movements, all converging toward the Armageddon system. Lord Planetary Governor Hermann von Straub, descendant of the von Straub dynasty that had ruled Armageddon for generations, dismissed these warnings as exaggerations. His fatal miscalculation would cost billions of lives. The Ork-Wa arrived with apocalyptic force on the Feast of the Emperor's Ascension in mid-941. Massive space hulks and crude Ork vessels appeared in system, brushing aside the meager orbital defenses that von Straub had refused to reinforce. At the head of this invasion force was a vessel unlike any other, a massive, heavily modified attack ship designated Killfist that served as the personal transport of warlord Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka. As Ork landing craft rained down upon Armageddon's surface, the Steel Legion mobilized with practiced efficiency despite their political leadership's failures. Colonel Joachim Brandt of the 8th Regiment, stationed near Hive Acheron when the invasion began, implemented emergency defense protocols without waiting for official authorization. His initiative saved thousands of lives as Steel Legion Chimeras evacuated critical personnel from outlying industrial complexes minutes before Ork drop pods crashed into them. The first major engagement occurred at the Acheron River Bridge, a strategic crossing point connecting Hive Acheron's manufacturing district to its primary spaceport. Captain Alessandra Kell commanded 3 mechanized platoons of the 8th Regiment in a desperate holding action as Ork war trucks and battle wagons attempted to secure the crossing. For 6 hours, her forces held the bridge, Chimera mounted heavy bolters cutting down waves of Ork infantry, while carefully positioned Leman Russ tanks eliminated Ork vehicles attempting to force the passage. The defense of the Acheron Bridge exemplified Steel Legion tactical doctrine, mobile firepower, interlocking fields of fire, and judicious use of terrain. When Ork forces finally threatened to overwhelm the position, Captain Kell ordered a textbook fighting withdrawal, leapfrogging squads backward, while maintaining continuous fire on the advancing greenskins. This action allowed thousands of civilians to evacuate through the spaceport before it too fell to the Ork advance. As the invasion progressed, a critical leadership vacuum emerged. Governor von Straub, refusing to acknowledge the severity of the situation, issued contradictory orders from his fortified palace in Hive Primus. Many of these commands were tactically unsound, demanding static defenses of indefensible positions or ordering counterattacks without proper reconnaissance or support. Steel Legion officers increasingly found themselves forced to choose between following official directives and preserving their forces for effective resistance. Into this chaotic situation stepped an unlikely figure who would become synonymous with the defense of Armageddon, Commissar Sebastian Yarrick. Initially assigned to the 4th Regiment as a political officer, Yarrick quickly distinguished himself not through the execution of retreating soldiers, but through his tactical acumen and personal courage. When Colonel Durgin of the 4th was killed during the defense of Hive Hades' outer Manufactoria, Yarrick assumed de facto command, reorganizing the regiment's scattered elements into an effective fighting force. Yarrick's influence on Steel Legion tactics became apparent within weeks of the invasion. Recognizing the Orks' tendency toward frontal assaults, he modified standard defensive deployments to create deliberate weak points that would channel Ork forces into carefully prepared killing zones. Steel Legion Chimeras, traditionally used as transports and fire support platforms, were repurposed as mobile ambush elements, using their speed to appear at unexpected locations and strike at Ork supply columns. The Commissar's most significant innovation was the development of Yarrick's Fist, a combined arms battle group drawn from multiple regiments. This formation consisted of mechanized infantry supported by Leman Russ tanks and Basilisk artillery, all operating under a unified command structure that bypassed the increasingly irrelevant planetary government. The Fist's first major operation, the relief of Hive and Furnace, demonstrated its effectiveness as it broke through Ork lines to evacuate thousands of munitions workers before the Hive's reactor core was scuttled to deny it to the invaders. As the war progressed, the situation deteriorated rapidly. By the 3rd month of the invasion, 5 of Armageddon's 12 major hives had fallen to the Orks. Ghazghkull proved to be unlike any Ork warlord previously encountered, methodical, strategic, and possessed of an uncanny ability to coordinate massive forces across multiple fronts. His personal guard, the Bully Boys, spearheaded assaults on critical Imperial positions, their heavy armor and devastating weapons making them nearly unstoppable on the battlefield. The fall of Hive Tartarus marked the nadir of Imperial fortunes. The Hive, home to Armageddon's largest promethium refineries, was overrun after a 3-week siege. Steel Legion defenders, led by Major Erwin Strauss of the 14th Regiment, conducted a floor-by-floor fighting retreat up through the Hive's levels. The final stand took place in the central refinery complex, where 2 companies of Steel Legion troops held off thousands of Orks long enough for the facility's self-destruct mechanisms to be activated. The resulting explosion destroyed much of the upper Hive and killed an estimated 50,000 Orks, buying precious time for defenses elsewhere to be reinforced. Throughout these desperate months, Commissar Yarrick's influence and reputation grew. His personal heroism during the defense of Hive Hades, where he lost his left arm to the power claw of an Ork warboss, inspired fanatical devotion among the troops. Steel Legion Medicae fitted him with a crude bionic replacement, a power fist salvaged from a damaged Sentinel Walker, which became his trademark. Ork prisoners, when interrogated, revealed that Ghazghkull's forces had developed a superstitious fear of the one-armed Yumi, believing him unkillable. The war's strategic balance shifted with the arrival of Space Marine reinforcements. The first to respond were the Blood Angels, whose strike cruiser, Angel's Fury, broke through the Ork blockade to deliver 3 companies of Astartes directly to Hive Primus. Chapter Master Dante himself led the relief force, coordinating with Yarrick to develop a counter-offensive strategy that would exploit the Blood Angels' shock assault capabilities in conjunction with Steel Legion mechanized warfare doctrine. The Salamanders chapter arrived shortly thereafter, bringing their expertise in urban warfare and flamecraft. Captain Heastand's forces deployed primarily to Hive Acheron, where they established a defensive perimeter around the hive's geothermal power plants. Steel Legion Hellhound squadrons were integrated into Salamander tactical formations, creating devastatingly effective anti-infantry strike teams that became known as Vulcan's Wrath among the defenders. Elements of the Ultramarines' 3rd Company, led by Captain Mikkel Fabian, reinforced the strategic Mannheim Gap, a narrow pass between Hive Primus and the ash wastes that served as a critical supply route. The disciplined Ultramarines bolstered Steel Legion defensive positions, their tactical flexibility complementing the Guard's mechanized doctrine. Joint operations between Ultramarine tactical squads and Steel Legion Chimera companies developed new combined arms approaches that would influence Imperial Guard doctrine for decades to come. The Liberation Campaign began in earnest 6 months into the war. The first major counter-offensive, Operation Thunderstrike, targeted Ork supply lines between Hive Tartarus and Hive Infernus. Steel Legion armored columns from the 8th and 22nd Regiments punched through Ork defensive positions, while Blood Angels assault squads deployed from Thunderhawk gunships to eliminate key Ork commanders. The operation succeeded in isolating Ork forces in Hive Infernus, setting the stage for its eventual recapture. The battle for Hive Infernus demonstrated the effectiveness of the newly developed Imperial tactics. Steel Legion Chimeras conducted rapid strike and fade attacks against Ork outposts, drawing greenskin reinforcements into pre-sighted killing zones, where Basilisk artillery and whirlwind missile launchers from the Ultramarines devastated their formations. Meanwhile, Salamander and Blood Angel assault teams targeted the Hive's upper levels, eliminating Ork leadership and disrupting their command structure. Throughout the Liberation Campaign, Commissar Yarrick remained at the forefront of operations. His tactical acumen and personal courage inspired Imperial forces to feats of valor that would have seemed impossible months earlier. During the battle for Deathmire, a crucial Prometheum processing facility, Yarrick personally led a counterattack against an Ork breakthrough, his power fist smashing through the armor of an Ork Nob while he continued to direct Steel Legion units via his command Vox. This action, witnessed by hundreds of troops, cemented his legendary status. The war reached its climax with the assault on Hive Tartarus, now renamed Ghazghkull's Fort by its Ork occupiers and serving as the warlord's primary headquarters. The operation, designated Deathblow, involved all available Imperial forces in a coordinated attack designed to eliminate Ghazghkull himself. Steel Legion armored columns approached from 3 directions, while Space Marine drop pods delivered assault teams directly into the upper Hive. Yarrick, now officially recognized as Imperial Commander by Segmentum authorities, coordinated the complex operation from a modified Leviathan command vehicle. The battle for Tartarus lasted 17 days of continuous combat. Steel Legion mechanized infantry fought room to room through the lower Hive, their chimeras providing mobile fire support in the wider thoroughfares. Space Marine forces secured key infrastructure nodes and eliminated Ork heavy weapons positions that threatened the Guard advance. Salamander Terminators, their tactical dreadnought armor allowing them to withstand even the toxic atmosphere of collapsed sections, spearheaded the assault on Ghazghkull's personal quarters in the former governor's palace. The final confrontation between Imperial forces and Ghazghkull occurred not in the expected location of the palace, but at landing pad Kappa 23, where the warlord was attempting to evacuate to his orbiting flagship. A combined force of Steel Legion veterans and Blood Angels assault marines intercepted the Ork leader and his bodyguard. The ensuing battle devastated the landing pad and surrounding structures, with dozens of Imperial troops falling to Ghazghkull's devastating attacks. Commissar Yarrick himself engaged the warlord in single combat, his power fist matching against the Ork's massive power claw in a duel that has since become legendary in Imperial propaganda. Though accounts vary, most reliable sources indicate that Yarrick managed to wound Ghazghkull significantly before being thrown aside by the massive Ork. The intervention of Chaplain Grimaldus of the Black Templars, who had arrived with late-coming reinforcements, prevented Yarrick's death, but could not stop Ghazghkull's escape. The warlord reached his shuttle and departed the surface, though his forces remained engaged across the planet. The escape of Ghazghkull represented a strategic failure, but a tactical victory for Imperial forces. With their primary leader off-planet, Ork forces began to fragment into competing warbands, making them vulnerable to the coordinated Imperial counterattacks. Over the following months, Steel Legion and Space Marine forces methodically reclaimed the fallen hives, purging them of Ork presence sector by sector. The reclamation of Hive Volcanus exemplified the Steel Legion's evolving tactical approach. Rather than attempting a frontal assault against entrenched Ork positions, Colonel Brandt of the 8th Regiment implemented a strategy of systematic isolation. Chimera-mounted infantry secured key transit junctions and supply routes, while Sentinel squadrons conducted hit-and-run attacks against Ork patrols. As the Greenskins' supplies dwindled, they were forced to launch increasingly desperate attacks that were met by prepared Imperial defenses. When the final assault came, Steel Legion forces had already mapped every approach and prepared interlocking fields of fire that decimated the charging Orks. Throughout the Reclamation campaign, the Steel Legion refined its urban combat techniques. Squads developed specialized roles: breach teams equipped with demolition charges and flamers, support teams with heavy weapons, and assault teams trained in close quarters fighting. Chimeras were modified with additional armor plating and dozer blades, allowing them to push through barricades and create new access routes through the debris-choked hive streets. These innovations, born of desperate necessity, would later be incorporated into standard Imperial Guard doctrine for hive warfare. By the time the last major Ork stronghold fell at Hive Tempestora, nearly 2 years had passed since the initial invasion. The cost had been staggering: billions of civilians dead, multiple hive cities reduced to ruins, and industrial capacity diminished by an estimated 60%. The Steel Legion itself had suffered grievous losses, with some regiments reduced to less than 20% of their original strength. Yet from this crucible of war emerged a fighting force whose reputation would spread throughout the Imperium. The aftermath of the Second War saw significant changes to Armageddon's military and political structure. Governor von Straub, whose incompetence had contributed significantly to the initial Imperial defeats, was removed from power and later executed for cowardice and dereliction of duty. Commissar Yarrick, though technically lacking the political authority for planetary governance, became the de facto military leader of Armageddon, overseeing the reorganization of the Steel Legion and the implementation of new defensive measures across the planet. The 998th year of the 41st millennium brought the nightmare that strategic planners across Armageddon had feared for decades. Astropathic communications from the fringes of the Armageddon sector reported a massive Ork fleet approaching, larger than any previously encountered. Long-range auger arrays confirmed the worst. Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka had returned, and this time he brought a war of unprecedented scale. Unlike the catastrophic leadership failures that had hampered Imperial preparations during the Second War, Armageddon now stood ready. The 57 years since Ghazghkull's previous invasion had been spent in constant preparation under the watchful eye of Commissar Yarrick, who despite his advanced age remained the spiritual leader of Armageddon's defense forces. The planetary defense grid had been completely overhauled, with overlapping fields of fire covering all viable landing zones. Void shield generators protected major hives and industrial centers, while hardened bunker networks connected strategic locations via underground transit systems. The Steel Legion itself had undergone a dramatic expansion. Where once 12 regiments had defended the planet, now over 30 stood ready, with 25 fully mobilized as the first reports of the Ork fleet arrived. Each regiment had been rebuilt around a core of veterans from the Second War, their experience informing training protocols and tactical doctrine. New patterns of Chimera transports featured enhanced armor plating and improved environmental seals, while the Legion's Leman Russ squadrons had been reinforced with demolisher variants specifically designed for the urban warfare that Imperial strategists predicted would dominate the coming conflict. Colonel Ishmael Krug of the 101st Steel Legion, a newly formed regiment composed primarily of veterans reassigned from other units, established the first contact with Ghazghkull's vanguard forces. His after-action report transmitted from the ash wastes north of Hive Hellsreach, described a green tide stretching beyond visual range, advancing toward the Hive's outer defenses. The 101st conducted a textbook fighting withdrawal, their chimeras laying minefields and triggering prepared demolition charges that collapsed key transit routes, delaying the Ork advance by precious hours. The opening phase of the war demonstrated how thoroughly the Steel Legion had internalized the lessons of previous conflicts. Rather than attempting to hold fixed positions against overwhelming numbers, mechanized units conducted mobile defense operations, striking at Ork columns before withdrawing to prepared secondary positions. Basilisk artillery batteries, now networked through encrypted Vox systems that prevented Ork jamming, delivered precisely calculated bombardments that disrupted greenskin formations before they could build momentum. Hive Hellsreach became the focal point of the initial Ork assault, with Ghazghkull apparently determined to capture its massive shipyards intact. The defense of the Hive fell to the 16th and 18th Steel Legion regiments, supported by elements of the Black Templars' Space Marine chapter under Reclusiarch Grimaldus. The coordination between Guard and Astartes forces showed a level of integration rarely seen in Imperial operations, with Steel Legion Chimeras transporting Black Templar assault teams to critical breach points, while Templar Thunderhawks provided close air support for Legion armored columns. The Steel Legion's tactical flexibility proved crucial during the Siege of Hellsreach. When Ork Gargants breached the outer defensive perimeter, Colonel Dirian Strauss of the 16th Regiment implemented Contingency Plan Vulture, a prepared response that had been developed specifically for such a scenario. Steel Legion armor withdrew from exposed positions, while Sentinel squadrons equipped with Hunter-Killer missiles conducted harassing attacks against the massive war machines. This delaying action provided time for Black Templar Sword Brethren to deploy from their strike cruiser directly onto the Gargants, planting melta charges at critical structural points. Meanwhile, across the planet, 23 other Steel Legion regiments engaged Ork forces at multiple landing zones. The scale of the conflict dwarfed even the massive battles of the Second War, with Imperial forces fighting simultaneously across thousands of square kilometers. The logistical systems developed during the decades of preparation proved their worth as ammunition, fuel, and replacement vehicles reached frontline units with remarkable efficiency despite the chaos of planetary invasion. The 8th Armageddon Steel Legion, now commanded by Colonel Alessandra Kell, promoted from her previous rank of captain following distinguished service during the Second War, spearheaded the defense of the vital Mannheim Gap. This narrow passage between mountain ranges represented a critical supply route connecting Hive Acheron to the Prometheum refineries of the southern continent. Kell's forces implemented a defense-in-depth strategy, with multiple fallback positions prepared along the 20-kilometer stretch of the gap. When the Ork assault came, it featured a new tactical approach that Imperial intelligence attributed directly to Ghazghkull's evolving strategic thinking. Rather than the frontal assaults typical of Ork warfare, the Greenskins deployed infiltration teams of commandos who targeted the Legion's command and control systems. Colonel Kell adapted rapidly, establishing mobile command posts that relocated every 6 hours and implementing redundant communication networks that prevented any single point of failure from compromising the defense. The Battle of Mannheim Gap demonstrated the Steel Legion's mastery of combined arms operations. Chimera-mounted infantry secured critical choke points, while Leman Russ squadrons provided fire support from hull-down positions along ridgelines. Hellhound flame tanks proved particularly effective against Ork infantry concentrations in the confined space of the gap, their Prometheum projectors turning narrow defiles into killing grounds. When Ork Stompas attempted to force the passage, concealed destroyer tank hunter squadrons emerged from camouflaged positions to engage with their powerful laser destroyers, crippling 4 of the massive war machines in the first hour of engagement. As the war expanded across Armageddon's surface, the Steel Legion's ability to coordinate operations across multiple theaters became increasingly important. The Legion's command structure, refined through decades of planning and exercises, allowed for decentralized execution within a framework of centralized strategic direction. Regimental commanders received clear objectives, but maintained tactical freedom to achieve those objectives based on local conditions, a flexibility that proved crucial as Ork forces attempted to disrupt planetary communication networks. The defense of Hive Acheron's industrial district showcased the Steel Legion's urban combat expertise. The 22nd Regiment, under Colonel Maximilian Voss, implemented the Hive Cell defensive doctrine developed following the Second War. This approach divided the sprawling factory complexes into discrete defensive sectors, each capable of operating independently if isolated by enemy advances. Steel Legion infantry transformed manufacturing facilities into fortresses, using heavy machinery as barricades and industrial chemicals as improvised weapons against Ork assault teams. Throughout the war, the Steel Legion demonstrated remarkable adaptability in the face of evolving Ork tactics. When Greenskin forces began deploying increased numbers of looted Imperial vehicles, Legion technical teams developed modified tank traps and mine patterns specifically designed to target the weaknesses in these cobbled-together machines. Sentinel squadrons equipped with specialized Auspex units identified looted tanks by their irregular engine signatures, allowing artillery batteries to prioritize these targets before they could reach Imperial lines. The war's complexity increased dramatically with the arrival of additional Imperial forces. Space Marine chapters including the Salamanders, Ultramarines, and Blood Angels deployed strike forces to critical sectors, while Titan legions provided heavy support at key engagement zones. Integrating these elite forces into the existing defensive structure presented significant challenges, but the Steel Legion's command staff had prepared extensively for such scenarios. Liaison officers with specialized Vox equipment coordinated between Guard units and their Astartes counterparts, while dedicated logistics teams ensured that the specialized ammunition and equipment required by Space Marine forces reached them despite the chaos of planetary warfare. The 14th Steel Legion Regiment, operating in the ash wastes surrounding Hive Volcanus, pioneered new tactics for countering Ork speed freaks, mobile warbands utilizing light vehicles for rapid strikes against Imperial supply lines. Colonel Jurgen Halder developed the Steel Web Doctrine, deploying his regiment's Chimeras in a dispersed network across likely approach routes. When Ork vehicles were detected, nearby Chimera squadrons would converge rapidly, enveloping the Greenskins in overlapping fields of fire, while Valkyrie gunships targeted any attempting to escape the trap. As the war progressed into its third month, the Steel Legion faced a new challenge: combat fatigue. Despite rotation systems designed to provide rest periods for frontline units, the relentless nature of the Ork assault meant many regiments had been in continuous combat operations since the invasion began. The Legion's Medicae Corps implemented field treatment protocols for combat stress, while veteran sergeants monitored their squads for signs of psychological breakdown. These measures, though unable to completely prevent combat fatigue, helped maintain the Legion's fighting effectiveness through the grueling campaign. The battle for Fire Forge Epsilon 23, a massive promethium processing facility in the equatorial regions, demonstrated both the Steel Legion's tactical prowess and the challenges of extended operations. The 17th Regiment, tasked with defending the facility, had been engaged in continuous combat for 43 days when a massive Ork assault threatened to overwhelm their positions. Despite exhaustion and dwindling supplies, Colonel Thaddeus Grimm implemented a brilliant defensive plan that channeled Ork forces into pre-sighted killing zones where his regiment's remaining heavy weapons could achieve maximum effect. When ammunition for crew-served weapons ran critically low, Grimm ordered a tactical innovation that would later be adopted across multiple regiments: the Rolling Thunder maneuver. Chimeras would advance in waves, firing their multi-lasers and heavy bolters in coordinated volleys before withdrawing to reload while the next wave advanced. This cycling of firepower maintained continuous pressure on the Ork assault while conserving the regiment's dwindling ammunition supplies. The 17th held for 3 more days until relieved by elements of the Salamander's 3rd Company, who expressed rare admiration for the Guard regiment's tenacity. The Steel Legion's vehicle maintenance capabilities proved crucial as the war extended beyond initial planning timelines. Mobile field workshops, many converted from civilian mining equipment, followed behind front-line units, conducting repairs under combat conditions. Technical adepts developed expedient repair procedures that allowed damaged chimeras to return to combat within hours rather than days, while salvage teams recovered parts from vehicles too damaged to repair. By the 6th month of the conflict, some chimeras were operating with components salvaged from 3 or 4 different vehicles, a testament to both the technical ingenuity of Legion maintenance crews and the desperate nature of the fighting. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Steel Legion's performance during the Third War was their ability to coordinate effectively with the diverse Imperial forces arriving to reinforce Armageddon's defense. When Night House Hawkshroud deployed to the plains of Anthrand, the 8th Regiment provided reconnaissance and security for these massive war engines, their sentinels identifying Ork tank concentrations for the Knights to engage, while Chimera-mounted infantry protected the Knights from infantry assaults. Similarly, when Catachan jungle fighter regiments arrived to reinforce the defense of the equatorial jungle regions, Steel Legion officers provided detailed tactical briefings on Ork behavior patterns observed during previous engagements. The war reached a critical juncture when intelligence reports indicated Ghazghkull himself had established a forward command post near the ruins of Hive Tempestora. The Steel Legion's 101st Regiment, reinforced with elements of the 16th and 22nd, formed the core of a strike force tasked with eliminating the Ork warlord. Colonel Krug developed an operation that balanced audacity with careful preparation, a night advance through territory thought impassable due to toxic chemical saturation, using specially modified chimeras with enhanced environmental seals. The assault on Ghazghkull's command post demonstrated the culmination of the Steel Legion's tactical evolution. Sentinel infiltration teams disabled Ork early warning systems, while Chimera-mounted stormtroopers breached the perimeter defenses at multiple points simultaneously. Leman Russ squadrons provided fire support from hull-down positions, their battle cannons targeting Ork heavy weapons emplacements with remarkable precision despite the limited visibility of night operations. For a brief moment, it appeared the operation might succeed in eliminating the Ork warlord who had twice brought devastation to Armageddon. Unfortunately, Ghazghkull had anticipated the possibility of such an attack. The command post contained only a body double, a particularly large knob surgically modified to resemble the warlord. The real Ghazghkull had already relocated to his orbiting flagship, from which he continued to direct the planetary assault. Though the operation failed in its primary objective, it succeeded in disrupting the Ork command structure for several crucial days, allowing Imperial forces to reclaim territory in 3 different sectors. As the war stretched into its 2nd year, the Steel Legion demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of continuing Ork pressure. Regiments that had been reduced to less than 40% strength were consolidated and reformed, with veterans distributed among the remaining units to maintain combat effectiveness. The Legion's training facilities, operating despite the planetary invasion, produced new recruits at an accelerated rate, with basic training compressed into an intensive 8-week program focused on essential combat skills. The Steel Legion's performance during the Third War for Armageddon cemented its reputation as one of the Imperium's premier fighting forces. Their mechanized doctrine, refined through 3 apocalyptic conflicts, provided a template that would influence Imperial Guard tactics across multiple sectors. The Legion's ability to integrate operations with Space Marine chapters, Titan Legions, and other specialized Imperial forces demonstrated a level of tactical flexibility rarely seen among Guard regiments. The name Commissar Sebastian Yarrick echoes through the history of Armageddon with a resonance that transcends mere military reputation. Born on Mistral in the Segmentum Tempestus, Yarrick's path to becoming the legendary Old Man of Armageddon began with his assignment to the Steel Legion as a standard commissar, tasked with maintaining morale and discipline. What emerged instead was a symbiotic relationship between man and regiment that would define both for centuries. Yarek's early career with the Steel Legion showed little indication of his future legendary status. Initial assessment reports described him as efficient but unremarkable, a competent political officer who performed his duties with appropriate zeal but displayed no exceptional qualities. This changed dramatically during the first Ork raids that preceded the Second War for Armageddon, when Yarek was attached to the 4th Steel Legion Regiment at Hive Hades. When Colonel Durgan fell during the defense of the Hive's manufacturing district, Yarek stepped into the leadership vacuum with natural authority. Rather than executing retreating soldiers as Imperial propaganda often depicts commissarial duties, he reorganized scattered Steel Legion units into an effective fighting force, implementing tactical innovations that played to the regiment's mechanized strengths while countering Ork assault patterns. The physical transformation of Yarek began during the battle for Hive Tartarus, when an Ork warboss severed his left arm with a power claw. Steel Legion Medicae, working with limited resources under battlefield conditions, replaced the limb with a salvaged power fist from a damaged Sentinel Walker. This crude but effective bionic became Yarek's signature weapon and a symbol of his unyielding resilience. Later in the campaign, he lost his right eye to an Ork sniper and had it replaced with a bionic that could project a laser beam of lethal intensity, a modification specifically chosen to exploit the Ork superstition that a baleful gaze could kill. What truly distinguished Yarek from other Imperial commanders was his deep understanding of Ork psychology. He recognized that Orks respect strength above all else, and deliberately cultivated an appearance and reputation that would inspire fear in his enemies. His black uniform adorned with skull motifs, the glowing red eye, and the massive power fist created an imposing silhouette that became known throughout Ghazghkull's forces. Interrogated Ork prisoners spoke of the Black Commissar with a mixture of fear and reluctant admiration that was unprecedented in Imperial records of greenskin behavior. The relationship between Yarek and the Steel Legion transcended normal military structures. Though technically an outsider, a representative of the commissariat rather than a regimental officer, he became the embodiment of Armageddon's defiance. Steel Legion troopers modified their own equipment to emulate aspects of his appearance, with officers often adding skull motifs to their helmets or red lenses to their rebreathers. These unauthorized modifications were tacitly permitted by regimental commanders who recognized their value for morale. During the 57 years between the Second and Third Wars, Yarek refused all attempts to reassign him to other sectors or promote him to administrative positions within the commissariat. Instead, he dedicated himself to preparing Armageddon for Ghazghkull's inevitable return. He personally oversaw the restructuring of the Steel Legion's training protocols, incorporating lessons from the previous conflict and developing specialized counter tactics for different Ork tribal groupings. By the time the Third War erupted, Yarek was well into his 9th decade of life, his body maintained by extensive bionics and rejuvenat treatments. Imperial authorities initially attempted to assign him to a strategic advisory role away from direct combat, but the Commissar flatly refused. His return to the front lines electrified Steel Legion morale, with veterans of the previous conflict taking it as confirmation that victory was possible despite the overwhelming odds. The psychological impact of Yarek's presence on the battlefield cannot be overstated. During the defense of Firebase Hemlock, the 14th Regiment was on the verge of collapse under the weight of an Ork assault when Yarek arrived with reinforcements. Survivors reported that his mere appearance at the command Chimeras hatch, power fist raised, triggered a spontaneous counter-attack by troops who moments before had been preparing to retreat. While Yarek stands as the most recognized hero of Armageddon, the Steel Legion produced numerous other commanders whose tactical innovations and leadership shaped the regiment's evolution. Among these, Colonel Joachim Faith of the 8th Regiment deserves particular recognition for his contributions during the Second War. Faith, a former Hive ganger from the industrial levels of Hive Acheron, rose through the ranks through a combination of tactical intuition and natural leadership ability. Unlike many Imperial Guard officers of noble birth, he maintained a close connection with the enlisted personnel under his command, regularly sharing their rations and personally inspecting their equipment before operations. This approach fostered intense loyalty that translated into combat effectiveness during the most desperate phases of the Second War. FAIF's most significant tactical innovation was the development of the Rolling Thunder deployment pattern for mechanized infantry. Recognizing that traditional static defense positions were vulnerable to Ork mass assault tactics, he developed a system where Chimera squadrons would operate in waves, advancing, engaging, and withdrawing, in a continuous cycle that prevented Ork forces from fixing their position for a concentrated attack. This approach maximized the Steel Legion's advantages in mobility and firepower, while minimizing exposure to the Greenskins' superior numbers. The Battle of Volcanis Plains demonstrated the effectiveness of FAIF's tactics. When a massive Ork warband threatened to outflank Imperial defenses around Hive Volcanis, the 8th Regiment was deployed to delay their advance long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Rather than establishing a defensive line that would quickly be overwhelmed, FAIF implemented a mobile defense across 50 kilometers of ash wastes. Steel Legion Chimeras struck at the Ork columns before withdrawing to new positions, creating the illusion of a much larger defending force while inflicting disproportionate casualties on the advancing Greenskins. FAIF's innovations extended beyond battlefield tactics to logistical systems. He pioneered the forward maintenance doctrine that became standard across the Steel Legion during later conflicts. This approach embedded technical adepts and repair facilities directly with combat units rather than relegating them to rear echelons. Mobile workshops, often converted from civilian mining vehicles, followed behind Chimera companies, allowing damaged vehicles to be repaired within hours rather than days. During extended operations, this capability proved crucial for maintaining combat effectiveness. The relationship between the Steel Legion and Adeptus Astartes forces, particularly during the Third War, was shaped significantly by Lord Commander Dante of the Blood Angels. Unlike many chapter masters who view Imperial Guard regiments as little more than human shields, Dante recognized the Steel Legion's tactical sophistication and incorporated their capabilities into his strategic planning. The joint operation to defend the Hemlock River bridges exemplified this cooperative approach. Blood Angel assault squads deployed from Thunderhawk gunships to eliminate Ork heavy weapons positions that threatened the bridges, while Steel Legion Chimera companies secured the approaches and established fire support positions. The operation featured unprecedented integration of command structures, with Steel Legion Vox operators embedded directly with Blood Angel tactical squads to coordinate movement and fire support. Dante's respect for the Steel Legion manifested in his willingness to commit precious Astartes resources to support Guard operations rather than pursuing independent objectives. When intelligence identified an Ork supply convoy approaching Hive Acheron, Dante assigned a full squad of assault marines to support Colonel Kell's ambush operation, rather than diverting the Steel Legion forces to support Blood Angel priorities, as many chapter masters might have done. This cooperative relationship extended to strategic planning sessions. Dante included senior Steel Legion officers in Astartes command councils, valuing their intimate knowledge of Armageddon's terrain and infrastructure. The defensive plan for Hive Hellsreach, which successfully repelled multiple Gargant assaults, emerged from one such joint planning session, where Steel Legion Colonel Saren's knowledge of the Hive's structural vulnerabilities complemented the Blood Angel's expertise in anti-armor operations. Among the lesser-known but significant Steel Legion commanders, Major Alina Strauss of the 22nd Regiment deserves special mention for her innovations in urban combat tactics. A veteran of the ash waste refineries before her military service, Strauss understood the industrial infrastructure of Armageddon's hives on an intuitive level that informed her approach to urban warfare. During the defense of Hive Acheron's manufacturing district, Strauss developed the vertical envelope doctrine that revolutionized the Steel Legion's approach to hive combat. Rather than treating urban battlefields as two-dimensional spaces, she incorporated vertical movement through maintenance shafts, factory gantries, and waste disposal systems. Her companies would appear seemingly from nowhere to strike at Ork positions before disappearing back into the industrial labyrinth, creating a defensive zone that extended kilometers upward through the hive spire. Strauss's approach required specialized training and equipment modifications. Her troops carried grapnel launchers adapted from mining equipment, allowing rapid ascent through vertical spaces, while their standard-issue combat knives were replaced with industrial cutting tools capable of opening access panels and maintenance hatches. These modifications, initially field expedients developed under combat conditions, were later standardized across Steel Legion units assigned to urban combat roles. The effectiveness of Strauss's innovations became apparent during the Third War when her regiment was tasked with defending Manufactorum Complex Delta 9, a critical production facility for Chimera components. Ork forces breached the complex's outer defenses, but found themselves unable to secure their gains as Steel Legion squads attacked from above, below, and behind, utilizing access ways invisible to the invaders. Despite being outnumbered nearly 10-1, the 22nd Regiment held the complex for 18 days until reinforcements arrived. Captain Hendrik Greel of the 16th Regiment pioneered specialized anti-armor tactics that proved crucial against Ork mechanized units. A former Leman Russ commander who transferred to infantry command after suffering burns that prevented him from operating in the confined space of a tank turret, Greel brought a tanker's perspective to infantry anti-armor operations. Recognizing that standard anti-tank weapons like missile launchers were often too slow to deploy effectively against fast-moving Ork vehicles, Greel developed the Hunter Cell concept, small teams of 4 to 6 soldiers equipped with melta-bombs and specialized grappling equipment. These cells would conceal themselves along likely approach routes, allowing the front elements of Ork vehicle columns to pass before striking at command vehicles and fuel tankers from close range. Greel's Hunter cells achieved their most significant success during the Battle of Ash Reach, when 3 such teams destroyed 17 Ork battle wagons in a single engagement, including the command vehicle of Warboss Gutrapa. The resulting confusion among the Ork forces allowed a Steel Legion counter-attack to reclaim territory that had been lost weeks earlier, securing a vital supply route to Hive Hellsreach. The tactical flexibility that characterized the Steel Legion's approach owed much to Lieutenant Colonel Maximilian Voss, whose background in Armageddon's Planetary Defense Force Logistics Corps gave him unique insights into supply management under combat conditions. Voss recognized that conventional Imperial Guard supply doctrine, with its emphasis on fixed depots and predetermined distribution schedules, was ill-suited to the fluid battlefields of Armageddon. Voss developed the distributed cache system that became standard practice during the Third War. Rather than establishing large, vulnerable supply depots, Steel Legion forces would create dozens of small, concealed caches throughout their operational areas. These caches, often disguised as debris piles or incorporated into ruined structures, contained ammunition, fuel, and critical spare parts. Their locations were recorded using an encrypted coordinate system that changed daily, preventing Ork forces from targeting supply lines effectively. This approach allowed Steel Legion units to operate independently for extended periods, even when cut off from main supply lines. During the siege of Firebase in Furnace, when Ork forces severed all ground access to the facility, the 29th Regiment maintained combat operations for 17 days by utilizing pre-positioned caches in the surrounding ash wastes. This resilience repeatedly confounded Ork commanders, who expected isolated Imperial units to run out of ammunition and fuel within days. Among the Steel Legion's senior commanders, General Augusta Reicher stands out for her strategic vision during the early phases of the Third War. As commander of Armageddon's Southern Continental Forces, Reicher faced the challenge of defending a vast territory with limited resources against multiple Ork landing zones. Rather than attempting to establish a continuous defensive line, she implemented a defense-in-depth strategy that concentrated forces around critical infrastructure, while maintaining highly mobile reaction forces to respond to breakthrough attempts. Reicher's approach emphasized intelligence gathering and early warning. She established an extensive network of observation posts throughout the southern ash wastes, many disguised as abandoned mining facilities or environmental monitoring stations. These outposts, typically manned by small teams with enhanced Vox equipment, provided crucial early warning of Ork movements, allowing her mobile reserves to deploy to threatened sectors before the Greenskins could consolidate their gains. The defense of Prometheum Pipeline Junction 12 Alpha demonstrated the effectiveness of Reiker's strategy. When Ork forces threatened this critical infrastructure node, she had already positioned the 8th and 14th regiments within rapid response range based on intelligence from her observation network. The resulting ambush caught the Ork column in open terrain, where Steel Legion armor could engage from optimal ranges. Over 300 Ork vehicles were destroyed for the loss of only 7 Chimeras and 2 Leman Russ tanks. The Steel Legion's reputation as one of the Imperium's premier fighting forces extended far beyond the ash wastes of Armageddon. Following the containment phase of the Third War, the High Lords of Terra recognized the tactical value of deploying these battle-hardened regiments to other conflict zones. The Steel Legion's mechanized warfare doctrine, honed through 3 apocalyptic conflicts against both demonic and Xenos threats, proved remarkably adaptable to a variety of battlefield environments. The first major off-world deployment came in the year 999 of the 41st millennium, when the 16th Armageddon Steel Legion was dispatched to the Damocles Gulf to counter Tau expansion in the region. Colonel Jurgen Halder, a veteran of both the Second and Third Wars, commanded the regiment during this campaign. The Tau Empire's rapid technological advancement and sophisticated battle doctrine presented a dramatically different challenge from the brutal but straightforward Ork tactics the Legion had faced on Armageddon. The 16th Regiment deployed to the agri-world of Nimbosa, which had fallen to Tau forces during their first expansion phase. The planet's rolling plains and scattered urban centers required significant adaptation of Steel Legion tactics. Colonel Halder modified the regiment's standard camouflage patterns, replacing the urban gray and desert tan with muted greens and browns that better suited Nimbosa's verdant landscape. Chimera crews received additional training in operating through dense crop fields without damaging their suspension systems or becoming bogged down in irrigation channels. The first engagement against Tau forces occurred at the Praxed's River Valley, where fire warrior cadres had established a defensive perimeter around a recently constructed command center. Initial reconnaissance by Steel Legion Sentinel squadrons revealed sophisticated sensor arrays and overlapping fields of fire from pulse rifle emplacements. Rather than the frontal assault typical of Imperial Guard doctrine, Halder implemented a night infiltration strategy that leveraged the Steel Legion's experience with toxic environments. Steel Legion troops, their rebreathers already designed for harsh atmospheric conditions, easily adapted to operating in darkness using low-light optics salvaged from damaged Sentinel cockpits. 5 Chimera companies advanced under cover of darkness, their engines muffled by special shrouds developed by the regiment's tech adepts. The Tau, whose helmet sensors were optimized for daylight operations, detected the approaching vehicles too late to organize an effective response. The battle demonstrated the Steel Legion's tactical flexibility. When Tau Hammerhead gunships arrived to support their ground forces, Chimera squadrons implemented the Scatter Shield maneuver developed during anti-Ork operations on Armageddon. Vehicles dispersed in seemingly random patterns that prevented the Tau from concentrating fire while maintaining interlocking fields of fire from their multi-lasers and heavy bolters. Meanwhile, infantry squads equipped with missile launchers targeted the grav engines of the Tau vehicles, forcing them to withdraw or risk catastrophic crashes. The 16th Regiment's campaign on Nimbosa lasted 14 months and involved 17 major engagements against Tau forces. Throughout the conflict, Colonel Halder continued to refine the Legion's tactics to counter Tau technological advantages. When facing Tau battlesuits, Steel Legion infantry deployed in loose skirmish formations rather than their typical tight fire teams, making it difficult for burst cannons to engage multiple targets simultaneously. Chimera drivers learned to recognize the electromagnetic signatures of Seeker missile launches, executing evasive maneuvers that dramatically reduced casualty rates from these weapons. The campaign culminated in Operation Killing Blow, a coordinated assault on the primary Tau command center at the former Imperial capital. The Steel Legion formed the vanguard of an Imperial battle group that included elements of the Ultramarines 4th Company and Catachan jungle fighters. Colonel Halder's forces breached the outer defenses using a feint attack that drew Tau reserves to the southern perimeter, while the main assault came from the northeast, where sensor coverage was weakest due to electromagnetic interference from nearby mining operations. The 16th Regiment suffered significant casualties during the final assault, but succeeded in disrupting Tau command and control systems long enough for Ultramarines Terminators to teleport directly into the central command structure. The operation forced a Tau withdrawal from Nimbosa and established Colonel Halder as one of the Imperium's foremost experts on countering Tau military technology. His tactical assessments were later compiled into a manual titled Armored Operations Against Technological Adversaries that became standard reading for officers throughout Segmentum Ultima. While the 16th Regiment was engaged in the Damocles Gulf, the 22nd Armageddon Steel Legion faced an entirely different threat along the galactic rim. Deployed to the mining world of Koralkal 8, the regiment encountered vanguard elements of Tyrannid Hive Fleet Kraken. Major Alina Strauss, promoted to regimental command following her distinguished service during the Third War for Armageddon, found her urban combat expertise initially of limited value against the biological horrors of the Tyrannid swarm. The first encounters proved costly, as traditional Steel Legion mechanized tactics faltered against the sheer biological mass of the Tyrannid assault. Chimera-mounted heavy bolters, devastatingly effective against Ork infantry, struggled to stem the tide of termagants and hormagaunts that overwhelmed vehicles through sheer numbers. Larger Tyrannid organisms like Carnifexes proved capable of disabling Leman Russ battle tanks with concentrated attacks against track assemblies and turret rings. Major Strauss responded with characteristic adaptability. Observing that Tyrannid organisms communicated through a synaptic network controlled by larger creatures, she redirected the regiment's reconnaissance assets to identify and track these synapse creatures. Sentinel squadrons, equipped with enhanced Auspex units originally designed to detect Ork commandos, proved adept at identifying the distinctive energy signatures of Tyrannid warrior broods and zoanthropes. The regiment's tactics evolved to prioritize these high-value targets. Special weapons squads equipped with plasma guns and meltaguns were attached to each Chimera company, deploying specifically to eliminate synapse creatures identified by reconnaissance elements. Meanwhile, Hellhound flame tanks proved unexpectedly effective against the lighter Tyrannid organisms, their promethium projectors igniting the volatile biochemistry of the Xenos and creating chain reactions that consumed entire swarms. The Battle of Koralkal Ridge demonstrated the effectiveness of these adapted tactics. When a massive Tyrannid force threatened the primary mining complex, the 22nd Regiment established a defensive perimeter centered around 3 interlocking fire bases. As the Tyrannid swarm advanced, Steel Legion artillery targeted concentrations of synapse creatures identified by forward observers. The resulting disruption to the hive mind's control created confusion among the lesser organisms, allowing Leman Russ squadrons to engage effectively from prepared positions. Despite these tactical innovations, the sheer biomass of the Tyrannid hive fleet ultimately forced an Imperial withdrawal from Koralkal 8. The 22nd Regiment conducted a fighting retreat to evacuation points, their chimeras forming armored convoys that protected thousands of civilian miners. Major Strauss personally commanded the rearguard, her command chimera being the last vehicle to board the final transport before orbital bombardment scoured the surface of all life to deny biomass to the Tyrannids. The regiment's experience against the Tyrannids led to significant modifications in Steel Legion equipment and doctrine. Vehicle crews received new close defense weapons designed specifically for repelling creatures attempting to breach hull sections. Chimera designs were modified with additional armor plating over vulnerable points identified during engagements with larger Tyrannid organisms. Perhaps most significantly, the regiment's standard infantry tactics were updated to include specific countermeasures for different Tyrannid organism types, with detailed identification guides issued to squad leaders and vehicle commanders. While the 16th and 22nd Regiments faced Xenos threats in distant sectors, the 8th Armageddon Steel Legion participated in one of the most significant conflicts of the late 41st millennium, the 13th Black Crusade. Deployed to the Cadian Gate as part of the massive Imperial Defense Force, the regiment found itself fighting alongside other legendary Guard units, including the Cadian Shock Troops and Death Corps of Krieg. Colonel Alessandra Kell, now in her 6th decade of service, but maintained by Juvenat treatments and a stubborn refusal to accept retirement, commanded the 8th during this campaign. Her experience fighting Chaos forces during the First War for Armageddon proved invaluable as the regiment faced the demonic legions of Abaddon the Despoiler. The 8th's deployment to the fortress world of Kasser Halm placed them directly in the path of a major Chaos offensive spearheaded by the Black Legion. The regiment's first engagement came at the Kolinar Plains, where Chaos cultist uprisings had overwhelmed local PDF forces. The Steel Legion deployed in classic mechanized formation, with Chimera companies advancing in echelon while Leman Russ squadrons provided fire support from ridgeline positions. The cultists, poorly equipped but fanatical, attempted to swarm the Imperial vehicles using human wave tactics reminiscent of Ork assaults on Armageddon. Colonel Kell countered with the Rolling Thunder doctrine refined during the Third War, cycling Chimera squadrons through engagement zones to maintain continuous fire while preventing any single unit from being overwhelmed. The regiment's experience fighting numerically superior enemies served them well as they systematically cleared cultist strongholds across the plains, establishing secure zones for Cadian reinforcements to deploy. The situation deteriorated rapidly when traitor Astartes of the Black Legion entered the battle. These corrupted space marines, equipped with armor and weapons dating back to the Horus Heresy, presented a threat level that few Guard units could effectively counter. Colonel Kell responded by implementing dispersed formation patterns specifically designed to minimize casualties from the heavy weapons favored by Chaos Space Marines. Steel Legion infantry adopted shoot and scoot tactics, engaging from maximum range before withdrawing to new positions before the traitor Astartes could close to effective bolter range. Chimeras operated in hunter-killer pairs rather than larger formations, using their mobility to strike at exposed flanks before withdrawing. These tactics could not defeat the Chaos Space Marines directly, but succeeded in slowing their advance and preventing them from bringing their superior close combat capabilities to bear. The 8th Regiment's finest hour came during the defense of Firebase Martyr, a critical supply and communication hub linking 3 Cadian defensive sectors. When a Chaos armored spearhead threatened to overrun the firebase, Colonel Kell implemented a defense-in-depth strategy that maximized the Steel Legion's strengths while neutralizing the advantages of the Chaos forces. Sentinel squadrons deployed in the ash wastes surrounding the firebase conducted harassing attacks against the flanks of the Chaos advance, forcing them to deploy screening elements that slowed their progress. Meanwhile, Steel Legion sappers prepared the battlefield with carefully concealed minefields designed to channel enemy vehicles into pre-sighted killing zones covered by dug in Leman Russ squadrons. When the Chaos forces finally reached the firebase perimeter, they encountered a defense unlike anything they had faced previously on Cadia. Steel Legion troops, fighting from prepared positions with interlocking fields of fire, cut down wave after wave of cultist infantry. Chimeras concealed in reinforced fire pits emerged to engage enemy vehicles from unexpected angles before withdrawing through prepared egress routes. The firebase held for 72 hours against continuous assault, allowing critical command personnel and communication equipment to be evacuated before the position finally fell. Despite the ultimate loss of Cadia to Abaddon's forces, the 8th Regiment's actions during the evacuation phase saved thousands of Imperial lives. Colonel Kell coordinated with Cadian authorities to establish secure evacuation corridors through which civilian and military personnel could reach transport ships. Steel Legion Chimeras formed armored convoys that protected refugee columns from Chaos raiders, while the regiment's remaining Leman Russ tanks held critical junctions against enemy advances. The fall of Cadia and the subsequent formation of the Great Rift presented new challenges for Steel Legion forces deployed throughout the Imperium. The 17th Regiment, operating in the Ultima Segmentum when the Cicatrix Maledictum formed, found itself cut off from Armageddon and forced to operate independently in increasingly desperate circumstances. Colonel Thaddeus Grimm, commanding the 17th on the agri-world of Largos II, received no new orders or communications for nearly 6 months following the formation of the Great Rift. With warp storms preventing astropathic communication and supply shipments, the regiment was forced to integrate with local defense forces and develop self-sufficiency. The Steel Legion's experience with harsh environments and limited resources on Armageddon proved invaluable as they adapted to these challenging circumstances. The regiment modified its vehicles to run on locally produced biofuels when promethium reserves ran low, while ammunition production facilities were established using machinery salvaged from damaged equipment. Steel Legion quartermasters worked with local authorities to develop sustainable supply chains that could support continued military operations without depleting resources needed by the civilian population. When a warband of Night Lords Chaos Space Marines emerged from the warp storms to raid Largos II, the 17th Regiment demonstrated remarkable tactical flexibility despite their limited resources. Unable to match the traitor Astartes in direct combat, Colonel Grimm implemented a strategy focused on protecting population centers while targeting the raiders' mobility. Steel Legion ambush teams disabled the Night Lords' vehicles and landing craft, forcing them to operate on foot and limiting the scope of their terror attacks. The Steel Legion's relationship with other Imperial organizations has always been characterized by pragmatic necessity rather than sentiment or tradition. Unlike regiments with centuries of established protocols governing their interactions with the Adeptus Astartes or Mechanicus, the Steel Legion's approach developed through the crucible of 3 apocalyptic wars, forging connections based on battlefield effectiveness rather than ceremonial formalities. The Space Wolves chapter maintains the longest-standing alliance with the Steel Legion, dating back to the First War for Armageddon. When Wolf Lord Joamag Fellhand sacrificed himself and his honor guard to delay Angron's advance at Hive Volcanus, he established a blood debt that neither side has forgotten. The Steel Legion honors this sacrifice annually, with veteran companies performing the Rite of Fellhand, a complex mechanized maneuver pattern that retraces the Wolf Lord's final stand, while Chimera-mounted troops fire ceremonial salutes with their lasguns. This alliance manifested most visibly during the Third War, when Logan Grimnar deployed 3 great companies to Armageddon. Rather than operating independently as Space Marines often prefer, the Wolves integrated directly with Steel Legion battle groups. Wolfguard pack leaders joined Steel Legion command staffs as advisors, while Thunderwolf cavalry operated alongside Sentinel squadrons in reconnaissance operations through the Ash Wastes. This unusual level of cooperation stemmed from mutual respect earned during the First War and reinforced through subsequent conflicts. Colonel Alessandra Kell of the 8th Regiment developed a particularly effective working relationship with Wolf Lord Ragnar Blackmane during joint operations in the Mannheim Gap. Kell's mechanized infantry provided the mobile firebase that allowed Blackmane's hunters to execute devastating strikes against Ork supply lines. When Kell's command Chimera was disabled by an Ork ambush, Blackmane personally led the rescue operation, fighting through dozens of greenskins to extract the colonel and her staff. This action cemented an operational partnership that would continue throughout the war. The Salamanders chapter's relationship with the Steel Legion evolved differently, beginning with tension, but developing into one of mutual professional respect. During the Second War, when Captain Heastand's forces deployed to Hive Acheron, initial coordination was hampered by the Salamander's distrust of the Steel Legion's pragmatic approach to civilian casualties. The Legion's willingness to sacrifice portions of hives to deny them to the enemy conflicted with the Salamander's commitment to protecting human life at all costs. This fundamental difference in philosophy came to a head during the defense of Hive Acheron's Manufactorum district. Colonel Maximilian Voss of the 22nd Regiment had prepared demolition charges throughout the district's support structures, intending to collapse entire sections if Ork forces breached the outer defenses. Captain Heastan countermanded these orders, insisting that thousands of civilian workers sheltering in the lower levels would be killed. The resulting argument reached Supreme Commander Dante, who sided with the Salamanders. The subsequent battle forced both forces to adapt. Without the option of controlled demolition, Steel Legion troops implemented the urban warfare techniques they had developed during the First War, using chimeras as mobile strongpoints, while infantry squads established interlocking fields of fire through the Manufactorum's labyrinthine corridors. The Salamanders deployed in support, their flamers proving devastatingly effective in clearing Orks from confined spaces without risking structural damage. By the battle's conclusion, both forces had developed a newfound appreciation for each other's capabilities. Colonel Voss acknowledged that the Salamanders' approach had saved thousands of lives, while still achieving the primary objective of denying the district to the enemy. Captain Heastan, in turn, recognized the tactical sophistication of the Steel Legion's urban combat doctrine. This mutual respect formed the foundation for much closer cooperation during the Third War. The Steel Legion's relationship with the Adeptus Mechanicus has always been defined by Armageddon's status as a vital industrial world. Unlike many Imperial Guard regiments that interact with the Mechanicus primarily for equipment maintenance and resupply, the Steel Legion works alongside Mechanicus personnel daily in Armageddon's massive factory complexes and forge facilities. This constant interaction has created a unique understanding between the organizations that manifests in both cooperation and tension. The Steel Legion benefits from preferential access to Mechanicus technical support for their vehicles and equipment. Chimeras and Leman Russ tanks assigned to Armageddon regiments typically feature enhanced machine spirits and additional modifications not found in standard patterns. These include improved filtration systems for operating in toxic environments, reinforced drivetrains capable of withstanding the corrosive ash wastes, and enhanced auspex arrays that can function despite electromagnetic interference from Armageddon's industrial facilities. This technical support comes with strings attached. The Mechanicus expects priority access to any archaeotech discovered during Steel Legion operations, and maintains veto power over certain deployment decisions that might risk damage to particularly valuable industrial facilities. During the Second War, this arrangement created significant friction when Magos Dominus Veneratus refused to authorize the destruction of Hive Tartarus's primary forge complex, even after Ork forces had breached its outer defenses. The standoff was resolved through the intervention of Commissar Yarrick, who negotiated a compromise. The Steel Legion would attempt to recapture the complex intact, but demolition charges would be placed as a contingency measure. The operation succeeded, with Steel Legion stormtroopers reclaiming the facility after a brutal room-by-room clearance operation. This outcome reinforced the pragmatic partnership between the organizations, acknowledging both the Mechanicus's technological priorities and the Steel Legion's tactical requirements. The relationship evolved further during the Third War when Fabricator General Kubik deployed significant Skitarii forces to Armageddon. These Mechanicus battle servitors operated alongside Steel Legion mechanized infantry in defense of critical manufacturing centers. Colonel Jurgen Halder of the 16th Regiment pioneered integrated tactics that paired Skitarii vanguard units with Chimera-mounted infantry, using the radiation-emitting weapons of the Skitarii to weaken Ork formations before Steel Legion troops engaged. This battlefield cooperation extended to technical collaboration. Mechanicus tech priests worked directly with Steel Legion maintenance crews to implement field modifications to vehicles based on combat experience. When Ork tankbustas demonstrated the ability to penetrate Chimera armor with their specialized weapons, Mechanicus engineers developed ablative armor panels that could be quickly attached to vulnerable points. These panels, manufactured in Armageddon's forge facilities, were distributed to front-line units within days of the initial encounters. The Steel Legion's relationship with the Ecclesiarchy presents a study in contrasts compared to many Imperial Guard regiments. Where units like the Vestroyan Firstborn or Mordian Iron Guard incorporate elaborate religious observances into their daily operations, the Steel Legion maintains a noticeably pragmatic approach to faith. This is not to suggest a lack of devotion. The Emperor is revered as fervently on Armageddon as anywhere in the Imperium, but rather that faith manifests differently in a regiment shaped by industrial efficiency and toxic wastelands. Regimental chaplains serve alongside Steel Legion units, but rarely interfere with tactical decisions or training regimens. Their primary role involves administering rites for the dead and maintaining morale through brief but meaningful observances before combat operations. The Litany of the Sealed Helm, recited as troops don their rebreathers before entering toxic zones, represents one of the few formalized religious practices unique to the Steel Legion. This short prayer, asking the Emperor to purify the air that passes through the filter, takes less than 30 seconds to recite, a reflection of the regiment's emphasis on efficiency. During the Second War, tensions arose between the Steel Legion and more zealous elements of the ecclesiarchy, who arrived with reinforcements from neighboring systems. Cardinal Maximilian Bach, accompanying Frateris militia volunteers from Ultima Segmentum, attempted to implement extended prayer services and religious processions that conflicted with the Steel Legion's operational tempo. Colonel Joachim Pfaff of the 8th Regiment diplomatically, but firmly refused these requests, prioritizing combat readiness over ceremonial observances. The situation reached a critical point when Cardinal Bach demanded that a Steel Legion company delay a counter-attack to participate in a blessing ceremony for their vehicles. Colonel Pfaff appealed directly to Commissar Yarrick, who supported the regiment's position. The resulting compromise established a pattern that would govern future interactions. Ecclesiarchy representatives could conduct whatever ceremonies they deemed appropriate, but Steel Legion personnel would participate only when operational requirements permitted. By the Third War, this arrangement had evolved into a more harmonious relationship. Ecclesiarchy priests assigned to Steel Legion units adapted their practices to the regiment's operational needs, developing abbreviated rites that could be performed during vehicle maintenance or ammunition resupply. The blessing of the machine spirit, traditionally a lengthy ceremony when performed for Space Marine vehicles, was condensed to a 5-minute ritual that tech priests could complete during standard pre-operation inspections. Among the Steel Legion's most complex relationships are those with other Imperial Guard regiments. As veterans of 3 apocalyptic conflicts on their homeworld, the Steel Legion views itself as elite specialists in mechanized warfare and toxic environment operations. This self-perception, while well-earned, sometimes creates friction when operating alongside regiments with different tactical doctrines or battlefield experiences. The relationship with the Cadian shock troops exemplifies both the potential for cooperation and conflict between Guard regiments. During the 13th Black Crusade, elements of the 8th Steel Legion deployed to Cadia operated alongside the 8th Cadian Regiment in defense of the Collinar Plains. Initial coordination was hampered by doctrinal differences. The Cadians favored more static defensive positions than the highly mobile Steel Legion was accustomed to maintaining. Colonel Alessandra Kell and her Cadian counterpart, Colonel Maurice Acton, resolved these differences through practical battlefield testing. A joint exercise pitting mixed companies against each other in simulated combat demonstrated the strengths and weaknesses of both approaches. The resulting integrated doctrine paired Cadian heavy weapons teams with Steel Legion Chimeras, creating mobile fire bases that could rapidly reposition while maintaining continuous fire support. This cooperation proved crucial during the evacuation of Firebase Martyr, where combined Cadian Steel Legion rearguard actions delayed Chaos forces long enough for thousands of civilians to reach transport ships. The relationship with the Death Corps of Krieg, by contrast, remains characterized by mutual professional respect but limited tactical integration. Both regiments specialize in operations under hostile environmental conditions, but their approaches could hardly be more different. Where the Steel Legion emphasizes mobility and tactical flexibility, the Death Corps favors methodical advances and attritional warfare regardless of casualties. These differences became apparent during joint operations in the ash wastes surrounding Hive Acheron during the Third War. Death Corps engineers had constructed elaborate trench networks to channel Ork advances into prepared killing grounds, a sound strategy against most enemies, but one that failed to account for the speed and unpredictability of Ork vehicle mobs. When greenskin warbages and trucks simply bypassed the trenches, Death Corps commanders committed to frontal assaults to reclaim ground regardless of cost. Steel Legion officers, observing these tactics, offered to provide Chimera transport to allow Death Corps troops to pursue the mobile Ork formations. The Krieg commanders initially refused, considering deviation from their prepared battle plan dishonorable. Only after direct intervention from Sector Command did they accept Steel Legion support, and even then maintained separate command structures that limited tactical coordination. Despite these challenges, both regiments developed a grudging respect for each other's capabilities. Death Corps observers noted the Steel Legion's efficiency in vehicle maintenance and ammunition conservation, while Steel Legion officers acknowledged the unmatched determination of Krieg troops in holding ground once taken. By the war's later stages, informal cooperation had developed at the company level, with Steel Legion Chimeras occasionally transporting Death Corps heavy weapons teams to new firing positions when operational needs aligned. The Steel Legion's relationship with the Catachan jungle fighters represents perhaps the most unexpected alliance between Guard regiments. On the surface, these forces could hardly be more different, one specializing in mechanized warfare across toxic ash wastes, the other in close-quarters jungle combat. Yet when elements of the 17th Catachan deployed to Armageddon during the Third War, they quickly developed effective joint operations with the 22nd Steel Legion. The key to this cooperation lay in the regiment's shared emphasis on adaptability and small unit leadership. Both forces trained their squad leaders to operate independently when necessary, making decisions based on local conditions rather than waiting for orders from higher command. This common approach allowed for rapid integration despite the differences in equipment and tactical doctrine. Major Alina Strauss of the 22nd Regiment pioneered the Chimera Hunter tactic that paired Catachan scout teams with Steel Legion vehicles. Catachan specialists would infiltrate Ork-held territory on foot, identifying key targets and weak points in enemy defenses. Once these reconnaissance elements had mapped approach routes, Steel Legion Chimera squadrons would conduct precision strikes against identified targets before withdrawing along pre-scouted extraction paths. This combination proved devastating against Ork encampments in the jungle regions of Armageddon's equatorial belt. The Catachan's expertise in setting ambushes complemented the Steel Legion's mobile firepower, creating kill zones that Ork forces struggled to counter. By the campaign's conclusion, mixed Catachan Steel Legion task forces had become standard for operations in Armageddon's more verdant regions, with both regiments exchanging personnel for training purposes. The oath-taking ceremony of a Steel Legion recruit represents perhaps the most solemn moment in a trooper's career. Unlike the elaborate cathedral ceremonies of the Mordian Iron Guard or the blood rituals of Catachan, the Steel Legion's oath occurs in the industrial heart of their assigned hive city. New recruits stand in formation on the factory floor of a Chimera assembly plant, surrounded by the machines they will soon operate and maintain. The ceremony deliberately coincides with a shift change, allowing veteran workers and soldiers to witness the next generation's commitment. The regimental commander administers the primary oath, a pragmatic pledge that emphasizes duty to Armageddon and the Imperium rather than personal glory. Recruits respond by activating their rebreathers in unison, a symbolic act acknowledging their acceptance of Armageddon's harsh reality. The distinctive hiss of hundreds of filtration systems engaging simultaneously creates an atmospheric backdrop that veterans describe as more moving than any cathedral choir. Following the primary oath, each recruit receives their regiment's specific battle honors inscribed on a small metal plate that attaches to their rebreather's filter housing. This placement ensures that with every breath, the trooper is reminded of those who fought before them. The 8th Regiment's filter plates, for example, bear the inscription Hellsreach, twice defended, never surrendered, referencing their actions during both the Second and Third Wars. The battle honors themselves reflect the Steel Legion's industrial mindset, focusing on objectives secured and tactical goals achieved rather than individual heroics. Firebase Epsilon, held for 37 days, commemorates the 14th Regiment's defense of a critical supply node during the Third War, while Mannheim Gap, supply lines maintained, acknowledges the 22nd success in keeping vital logistics routes open despite continuous Ork assaults. These honors emphasize collective achievement over personal glory, reinforcing the Legion's identity as a cohesive fighting force rather than a collection of individuals. This pragmatic approach extends to promotion ceremonies, which typically occur in the field rather than at formal parades. When a trooper advances in rank, their squad leader simply presents them with new insignia during a standard equipment inspection. The promoted soldier is expected to continue their duties without interruption, demonstrating that increased responsibility comes without special privileges. The only acknowledgement might be an extra ration of amazek shared among squad members during the next rest rotation, a brief celebration that recognizes achievement without disrupting operational efficiency. The industrial character of Armageddon permeates every aspect of Steel Legion culture. Even their slang reflects their manufacturing background, with terms borrowed from factory work repurposed for military applications. A well-executed operation is described as running smooth as a new transmission, while a problematic situation might be gummed up like a filter in ash season. Squad leaders often refer to coordinating their troops as keeping the production line moving, while particularly efficient soldiers earn the compliment of being factory certified. This industrial mindset shapes the Legion's approach to warfare at a fundamental level. Where other regiments might view combat as a test of courage or an opportunity for glory, Steel Legion troopers approach it as dangerous but necessary work, not fundamentally different from operating machinery in Armageddon's toxic manufacturing zones. Objectives are production targets, enemy positions are maintenance issues to be resolved, and casualties represent acceptable operational losses within certain parameters. The Steel Legion's relationship with their vehicles exemplifies this industrial perspective. Unlike the ritualistic reverence that Space Marines show toward their equipment or the superstitious practices of some Guard regiments, Steel Legion troops maintain their Chimeras and Leman Russ tanks with methodical efficiency. Maintenance schedules are strictly observed, with vehicle crews spending nearly as much time on upkeep as in combat operations. This maintenance process has developed its own cultural significance. The communion of the machine represents a daily ritual where crew members inspect every component of their vehicle while reciting the technical specifications and operational parameters. This practice serves both practical and psychological purposes, ensuring equipment readiness while reinforcing the crew's intimate knowledge of their vehicle's capabilities and limitations. Vehicle naming conventions within the Steel Legion further reflect their industrial heritage. Where other regiments might name tanks after mythological figures or fearsome beasts, Steel Legion vehicles typically bear designations like Production Unit 117 or Efficiency Maximizer. These utilitarian names might seem cold to outsiders, but they reinforce the Legion's view of vehicles as tools rather than entities deserving of personification. The exception comes with particularly long-serving vehicles, which sometimes earn unofficial nicknames based on manufacturing quirks or battlefield incidents. A chimera known as Smokestack might have a distinctive exhaust pattern, while Hard Starter might require specific procedures to activate its engine. The toxic environment of Armageddon has shaped Legion culture in ways that extend beyond their distinctive rebreathers and greatcoats. Steel Legion troops develop an acute awareness of environmental hazards that influences their tactical thinking. Training exercises frequently include scenarios where battlefield conditions change suddenly, toxic gas clouds rolling across defensive positions, or acid rain compromising equipment functionality. This environmental awareness translates to a heightened ability to exploit terrain features that might affect enemy forces differently than Legion troops with their specialized equipment. The Legion's memorial traditions reflect both their industrial background and the harsh realities of Armageddon's environment. Unlike the elaborate tomb worlds of more traditional regiments, the Steel Legion commemorates its fallen through practical means. When a trooper dies, their rebreather filter is removed and added to a filtration wall in their home hive's main manufacturing district. These walls, consisting of thousands of filters arranged in regimental patterns, serve as both memorials and functional air purification systems, literally allowing the fallen to continue protecting their comrades and civilians. For those who die off-world, a different tradition applies. Their equipment is salvaged for usable components, with their rebreather's serial number etched onto whatever part proves most valuable. This practice, called continuing service, ensures that something of the fallen soldier remains in the fight. Vehicle crews take particular pride in tracking these memorial components, sometimes maintaining detailed records of which parts contain the identification marks of previous operators. The psychological impact of fighting multiple apocalyptic wars on their homeworld has profoundly shaped the Steel Legion's collective identity. Unlike regiments that deploy to distant battlefields, Steel Legion troops fight with the knowledge that failure means the destruction of their families, homes, and way of life. This creates a defensive mindset fundamentally different from expeditionary forces. They aren't fighting for abstract imperial ideals, but for the very survival of everything they know. This perspective manifests in the Legion's approach to defensive operations. Positions are prepared with meticulous attention to fallback routes and secondary defensive lines, reflecting an institutional memory of previous conflicts where flexible defense proved more effective than static resistance. Even in offensive operations, Steel Legion commanders typically maintain substantial reserves and pre-plan extraction routes, prioritizing force preservation over territorial gains that can't be effectively held. The experience of rebuilding after each conflict has also shaped Legion culture. Many troopers serve dual roles as both soldiers and skilled industrial workers, transitioning between military and manufacturing duties as strategic needs dictate. During the Reconstruction periods following both the Second and Third Wars, Steel Legion veterans supervised civilian work crews rebuilding critical infrastructure, their military experience providing valuable insights into designing more defensible structures. This dual identity creates a unique perspective among Steel Legion personnel. They understand the practical value of what they're defending, not just in terms of strategic resources, but as the production capacity necessary for continued resistance. A factory isn't merely a building, but a weapons system that produces the tools needed to fight, making its defense as important as any frontline position. The concept of productive defense permeates Steel Legion tactical thinking. When forced to hold ground, troops instinctively seek ways to make their defensive positions contribute to broader war efforts. During the siege of Hive Acheron in the Third War, troops of the 22nd Regiment converted a surrounded manufacturing district into an improvised repair facility, maintaining vehicles and equipment for mobile forces operating outside the encirclement. This approach transformed what might have been an isolated last stand into a valuable strategic asset that tied down Ork forces while supporting counter-attacks elsewhere. The Steel Legion's victory traditions similarly reflect their practical mindset. Rather than elaborate parades or ceremonial honors, successful operations are commemorated through efficiency bonuses, additional resource allocations to units that achieved objectives with minimal losses. These bonuses might include priority access to replacement equipment, additional ammunition allowances, or even rare mechanical components for vehicle customization. The most significant victory celebration in Steel Legion culture is the Remembrance of Function, held annually on the anniversary of Ghazghkull's retreat during the Second War. Unlike most Imperial victory commemorations with their religious overtones and martial displays, this event centers around a 24-hour manufacturing surge where all Armageddon's production facilities operate at maximum capacity. The output, typically Chimera components or ammunition, is blessed by Mechanicus priests and distributed to Steel Legion units as tangible proof of Armageddon's continued defiance. Superstitions persist even within the Legion's industrial culture. Vehicle crews refuse to clean ash residue from certain parts of their machines, believing the accumulated dust from multiple engagements provides protection against enemy fire. Infantry squads develop rituals around their assigned chimeras, such as circling the vehicle counterclockwise before boarding or tapping specific panels in sequence for luck. Commanders generally tolerate these practices as harmless morale boosters, provided they don't interfere with operational efficiency. The relationship between different Steel Legion regiments creates another layer of cultural identity. While all share the same basic training and equipment, each regiment develops distinctive characteristics based on their assigned hive city and combat experiences. The 8th Regiment, drawing primarily from Hive Hellsreach, emphasizes urban combat tactics and close-range engagements. Their troops are recognizable by the distinctive gray urban camouflage patterns painted on their vehicles and the reinforced melee weapons they carry as sidearms, a practical response to the close-quarters fighting that dominated the defense of Hellsreach during both major Ork invasions. The 14th Regiment, by contrast, recruits heavily from the ash waste refineries and develops specialized expertise in long-range operations across Armageddon's toxic deserts. Their vehicles feature enhanced filtration systems and extended fuel tanks, while troops receive additional training in navigation across featureless terrain. The regiment's unofficial motto, "First in, still here," references their typical role as the initial deployment into contested territories and their reputation for holding positions long after supply lines become compromised. These regimental identities manifest in good-natured rivalry during the rare periods between conflicts. The Chimera Trials, held whenever multiple regiments gather for joint exercises, feature competition between vehicle crews in navigation, obstacle courses, and tactical problem-solving. The winning regiment earns the right to display a small steel medallion on their command vehicles until the next competition, a modest trophy that nonetheless generates fierce competition. The Steel Legion's approach to field promotions reveals much about their values and priorities. Unlike regiments where advancement might come through demonstrating personal bravery or accumulating kills, the Legion promotes those who demonstrate resource efficiency and tactical adaptability. A sergeant who accomplishes an objective while minimizing ammunition expenditure and vehicle, where might advance more quickly than one who achieves the same goal through costly frontal assaults. This system reinforces the Legion's industrial perspective that views warfare as a production challenge, where inputs must be carefully balanced against outputs. The psychological impact of Armageddon's multiple apocalyptic wars manifests in the Legion's distinctive gallows humor. Troopers joke about renovation opportunities when buildings are destroyed or describe particularly devastating weapons as urban renewal devices. This dark humor serves as a coping mechanism for troops who have witnessed their homeworld devastated multiple times, allowing them to process trauma while maintaining operational effectiveness. Perhaps the most telling cultural tradition is the survivors' accounting conducted after major engagements. Rather than focusing solely on casualties and equipment losses, this assessment identifies which manufacturing capabilities remain functional and prioritizes the protection or restoration of critical production facilities. This practice reinforces the Legion's understanding that Armageddon's true strategic value lies not in territory, but in industrial capacity, the factories and refineries that produce the materials needed to continue resistance. The formation of the Great Rift in 999 fundamentally altered the strategic landscape of the Imperium, and Armageddon was no exception. The massive warp tier that split the galaxy in two created immediate and profound challenges for the Steel Legion. Initial astropathic reports were fragmented and contradictory, but one fact became clear within days: Armageddon now stood on the edge of what Imperial authorities designated the Imperium Nihilus, the dark half of the Emperor's domain, where the Astronomican's light flickered weakly if it could be perceived at all. For the Steel Legion, this new reality manifested first as a logistics crisis. Supply shipments from Forge Worlds in the Segmentum Solar became irregular and unpredictable, with some convoys disappearing entirely into the warp. Ammunition for vehicle-mounted weapons, replacement parts for damaged chimeras, and even the specialized filtration components for rebreathers became increasingly scarce. Colonel Thaddeus Grimm of the 17th Regiment, serving as acting commander of Armageddon's planetary defense during this period, implemented immediate rationing protocols that would have seemed extreme even during the height of the Third War. The Steel Legion's industrial background proved crucial during these early months of isolation. Manufactorum complexes that had been producing equipment for export to other Imperial worlds were quickly retooled to support local needs. Chimera assembly lines previously dedicated to supplying Guard regiments across the sector were converted to produce spare parts for existing vehicles. The specialized forge facilities at Hive, which had manufactured Hellgun power packs for Tempestus Scions, were repurposed to create the filtration components needed for Steel Legion rebreathers. Recruitment patterns shifted dramatically in response to these new constraints. Where previously the Steel Legion had maintained over 30 regiments with significant portions deployed off-world, Planetary Command now consolidated forces into 20 regiments maintained at full strength. Training cycles were extended from 16 to 24 weeks, with additional emphasis on field maintenance and improvised repairs. New recruits spent nearly as much time in manufacturing apprenticeships as in combat drills, ensuring each soldier could contribute to equipment maintenance and production when not actively engaged in defense operations. The tactical doctrine of the Steel Legion evolved in response to these material constraints. The resource-conscious engagement protocols developed during the Third War became standard operating procedure, with strict accounting for ammunition expenditure and vehicle wear during even routine patrol operations. Chimera squadrons adopted minimal operation profiles that limited engine hours and track usage, while infantry trained extensively in static defense positions that had previously been considered contrary to the Legion's mechanized doctrine. These adaptations proved prescient when, approximately 8 months after the formation of the Great Rift, long-range auger arrays detected the approach of a massive Ork fleet. Initial assessments suggested this force represented a splinter of Ghazghkull's Wa, though the warlord himself was not detected among them. Whether opportunistic raiders or a deliberate probe of Armageddon's defenses following the catastrophic changes in the galaxy, the Greenskin Armada represented an existential threat to a world still recovering from the Third War. Colonel Grimm implemented Contingency Plan Iron Hammer, a defensive strategy developed specifically for scenarios where the Steel Legion would face major threats with limited external support. Rather than attempting to defend all of Armageddon's territory, Iron Hammer concentrated forces around critical manufacturing centers and promethium refineries, while establishing forward observation posts in less vital areas. Mobile reserves, consisting primarily of the most fuel-efficient vehicles in the Legion's arsenal, were positioned at strategic junctions to respond to breakthrough attempts. The Ork landings began in the equatorial ash wastes, far from the major hive cities, but dangerously close to several promethium extraction facilities. The 8th and 14th Regiments, deployed as the first response force, encountered a greenskin horde that displayed unexpected tactical sophistication. Rather than the frontal assaults typical of Ork warfare, these forces utilized infiltration tactics and night movement to bypass Steel Legion strongpoints and strike at vulnerable supply depots. Major Alina Strauss, now commanding the 8th Regiment following Colonel Kell's deployment to Cadia before the formation of the Great Rift, adapted quickly to these unusual Ork tactics. Drawing on experience gained fighting Tyranid infiltrators during her previous command, Strauss implemented a detection grid strategy using Sentinel squadrons operating in pairs to cover maximum territory with minimal fuel expenditure. When Ork infiltration teams were located, Steel Legion forces would not immediately engage, but instead track them to identify larger concentrations before committing precious ammunition and fuel to combat operations. This patient, resource-conscious approach frustrated the Ork advance and gradually forced them to abandon their uncharacteristically subtle tactics in favor of more typical mass assaults. When these finally came, Steel Legion forces were well prepared with pre-sighted killing fields and carefully planned fields of fire that maximized the effect of their limited ammunition supplies. The Battle of Refinery Complex Delta 7 exemplified this approach. with a single company of the 14th Regiment holding the facility against an Ork force nearly 10 times their number through disciplined fire control and excellent use of terrain. The arrival of Primaris Space Marine reinforcements 6 months into this conflict marked a turning point not just in the immediate defense of Armageddon, but in the evolution of Steel Legion doctrine. Captain Atreus of the Salamanders chapter arrived with 2 full companies of Primaris Marines, including specialized Inceptor and Aggressor squads, whose tactical capabilities were unknown to the Steel Legion commanders. This represented the first deployment of these new Astartes to Armageddon, and their impact was immediate and profound. The initial integration of Primaris forces into Steel Legion defensive operations proved challenging. The new Astartes operated according to tactical doctrines developed by Belisarius Cawl and Robute Guilliman that emphasized mobility and striking power in ways that sometimes conflicted with the resource conservation approach the Steel Legion had been forced to adopt. Captain Atreus's Inceptor squads, with their ability to deploy via grav chutes directly into combat zones, expected ammunition resupply capabilities that Armageddon's strained logistics networks struggled to provide. Colonel Grimm and Captain Atreus established a joint command protocol that addressed these integration challenges through mutual adaptation. Steel Legion logistics officers were assigned directly to Primaris squad leaders, providing real-time information on resource availability and constraints. Meanwhile, Primaris lieutenants joined Steel Legion tactical planning sessions, offering insights into how their specialized capabilities could achieve maximum impact with minimal support requirements. The resulting Armageddon pattern deployment represented a significant evolution in Imperial combined arms doctrine. Primaris intercessor squads with their bolt rifles provided the long-range precision firepower that the ammunition-constrained Steel Legion forces lacked, while Legion Chimeras offered the protected mobility that even the enhanced Primaris physiology benefited from in Armageddon's toxic environment. Aggressor squads with their Flamestorm gauntlets operated alongside Steel Legion veterans in urban clearance operations, their weapons proving devastatingly effective against Ork forces attempting to establish strongholds in damaged hive sections. Perhaps the most significant tactical innovation emerged from the cooperation between Steel Legion Sentinel squadrons and Primaris Inceptor teams. The Sentinels, with their excellent sensor packages but limited offensive capabilities, would identify Ork concentrations and mark them with specialized targeting beacons. Inceptor squads would then deploy via grav chute insertion, striking with overwhelming force before withdrawing to prepared extraction points where Steel Legion Chimeras waited to transport them back to defensive lines. This hammer and anvil tactic allowed for precision application of the Primaris Marines' superior combat power, while minimizing their exposure to Armageddon's environmental hazards. The technology transfer between the Steel Legion and Primaris forces flowed both ways. Steel Legion technical adepts gained invaluable exposure to the advanced systems of Primaris armor and weapons, while the Astartes benefited from the Legion's extensive experience with environmental protection systems. Within months, Primaris squad leaders had incorporated modified Steel Legion rebreather components into their helmet systems, allowing for more efficient operation in Armageddon's toxic atmosphere. Similarly, Steel Legion vehicle crews adopted maintenance protocols developed for repulsor transports that improved the efficiency of their Chimera's engine systems by nearly 20%. The most profound impact of the Primaris deployment came not through technology or tactics, but through strategic perspective. Captain Atreus brought news from beyond Armageddon that fundamentally altered the Steel Legion's understanding of their position within the fractured Imperium. The resurrection of Robute Guilliman, the formation of the Indomitus Crusade, and the deployment of Primaris reinforcements across the galaxy represented a strategic initiative unlike anything seen since the Great Crusade. For the Steel Legion, accustomed to thinking of themselves as defending a vital but ultimately isolated industrial world, this broader perspective required significant adjustment. Colonel Grimm convened a strategic assessment council, including representatives from all Steel Legion regiments, Adeptus Mechanicus authorities, and Captain Atreus. This gathering, held in the armored bunkers beneath Hive Hellsreach, spent 17 days analyzing the implications of the changed galaxy for Armageddon's defense doctrine. The resulting Indomitus Protocol represented the most significant revision of Steel Legion strategic thinking since the aftermath of the First War. The protocol recognized that Armageddon's strategic value had actually increased in the post-Rift galaxy. As an industrial world capable of producing vehicles, weapons, and ammunition with minimal external support, it represented an irreplaceable asset in a region where supply lines were constantly threatened by warp storms and enemy action. The Steel Legion's primary mission expanded beyond merely defending Armageddon itself to securing the surrounding system and maintaining production capacity that could support Imperial forces across the sector. This expanded strategic vision necessitated changes to recruitment and training. Where previously the Steel Legion had focused on creating specialists in mechanized warfare, the new doctrine required troops capable of operating across a broader tactical spectrum. Training cycles incorporated void combat exercises for troops designated for void station defense, while selected companies received instruction in naval boarding actions from Primaris Vanguard specialists. The 22nd Regiment was entirely retasked as a rapid reaction force, equipped with the Legion's most fuel-efficient vehicles, and trained specifically for deployment to neighboring systems through limited-capacity warp jumps. The material constraints that had forced the Steel Legion to adopt conservation-focused tactics gradually eased as the Indomitus Crusade restored supply lines through the Nachmund Gauntlet. Shipments of ammunition, vehicle components, and specialized equipment began to reach Armageddon with increasing regularity. Rather than abandoning their resource-conscious protocols, however, Legion Command incorporated these efficiencies into their standard doctrine, creating a force that could maintain combat effectiveness even when external supply was interrupted. The most visible manifestation of this new approach appeared in the reorganized vehicle pools. Each regiment maintained a corps of fully equipped Chimeras and Leman Russ tanks fueled and armed for immediate deployment, while a larger reserve of vehicles was kept in a reduced readiness state that minimized maintenance requirements. This tiered readiness system allowed the Legion to surge combat power when needed while conserving resources during quieter periods, a direct adaptation of manufacturing principles to military operations. The influence of Primaris combat doctrine became increasingly apparent in Steel Legion infantry tactics. Where previously the Legion had emphasized the Chimera as the primary weapons platform, with infantry serving mainly to secure and hold ground taken by vehicular firepower, the new approach incorporated more balanced combined arms operations. Infantry squads trained extensively in the aggressive fire and maneuver tactics favored by intercessor squads, using their vehicles for rapid repositioning between combat engagements rather than as mobile bunkers. This evolution became evident during the campaign to reclaim the outlying processing stations of the Hemlock River Basin. The 14th Regiment, operating with Primaris Hellblaster support, demonstrated a tactical flexibility previously unseen in Steel Legion operations. Chimera transports would rapidly deploy infantry squads to advantageous firing positions, then withdraw to covered locations, while the troops engaged Ork forces with disciplined volley fire reminiscent of intercessor tactics. Once the enemy was suppressed, the vehicles would return to extract the infantry and move them to new positions, maintaining constant pressure while minimizing exposure to counterattack. The Steel Legion's adaptation to the realities of the Indomitus era extended beyond tactics to strategic positioning within the broader Imperium. Colonel Grimm established direct communication protocols with the nearest Custod's shield host, acknowledging Guilliman's reorganization of Imperial command structures. Steel Legion officers underwent briefings on the Codex Imperialis, the Primarch's attempt to create a more coherent strategic framework for Imperial forces. This outward-looking approach represented a significant departure from the traditionally insular perspective that had characterized Armageddon's military leadership since the First War. As the immediate Ork threat was contained and eventually eliminated, the Steel Legion faced a new strategic question: whether to resume the practice of deploying regiments off-world in support of broader Imperial campaigns. The resource constraints that had initially forced consolidation had largely been resolved, creating the capacity to raise additional regiments for external deployment. However, the experiences of the post-Rift period had demonstrated the vulnerability of even a heavily industrialized and well-defended world when isolated from Imperial support networks. The compromised position that emerged reflected the Steel Legion's pragmatic character. 4 regiments, the 8th, 16th, 22nd, and 29th, were designated as expeditionary forces available for deployment throughout the sector, while the remaining regiments maintained their focus on Armageddon's defense. This balanced approach allowed the Legion to contribute to broader Imperial security while maintaining sufficient force strength to deter or defeat future threats to their homeworld. The first test of this new deployment doctrine came when the 16th Regiment was assigned to support Imperial forces countering a genestealer cult uprising on Varagon's world, a mining colony 3 systems from Armageddon. Colonel Jurgen Halder, now in his 4th decade of service, but maintained in peak condition through limited rejuvenat treatments, commanded the expedition. The regiment deployed with a full complement of vehicles modified based on Primaris design principles, including Chimeras with enhanced suspension systems and improved communications arrays derived from repulsor technology. The Varagon campaign demonstrated both the strengths and limitations of the Steel Legion's adapted doctrine. The regiment's mechanized warfare expertise proved invaluable in the mining colony's extensive tunnel networks, where modified chimeras could transport troops rapidly between engagement zones while providing fire support in the confined spaces. However, the Legion's traditional emphasis on vehicle-mounted operations initially limited their effectiveness against the cult's infiltration tactics, requiring rapid adaptation of infantry deployment patterns. As the era Indomitus continues to unfold, the Steel Legion stands at a crossroads. The industrial might of Armageddon remains a vital Imperial asset in a fractured galaxy, while the combat experience of its regiments represents an irreplaceable resource for Imperium beset by threats from all quarters. The integration of Primaris tactical doctrines and technologies has created new possibilities for the evolution of the Legion's mechanized warfare approach, while the strategic vision brought by Guilliman's reforms offers a broader context for Armageddon's contributions to Imperial security. The Steel Legion's future, like its past, will likely be defined by pragmatic adaptation to changing circumstances. The regiments that survived 3 apocalyptic wars on their homeworld and emerged from the upheaval of the Great Rift, with their fighting capability intact, have demonstrated a resilience that transcends mere military effectiveness. In their distinctive greatcoats and rebreathers, advancing alongside rumbling chimeras across toxic wastelands or distant battlefields, the soldiers of the Steel Legion carry forward a tradition of determined resistance against overwhelming odds, a tradition that will surely be needed in the uncertain days that lie ahead for the Imperium of mankind.